It is a pleasure to be joined once again by the man known as Sid Vicious. Sid, welcome back to the shoot.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely, it's a pleasure. We're going to pick up where we left off 10 years ago with our last shoot. And after we did our last shoot together, and you talked a little bit about ECW and the shoot, just your views from watching it, and you actually wound up in ECW.
Sure did.
And how did that all come about?
Well, I got a call from Paul, and he was, said, hey, I'd like to bring you in, unadvertised in the beginning. From what I think I know of the business, I think he was really doing a great job of the way he was using me. It was pretty much, like I said, usually unannounced, unadvertised. I'd show up, power bomb a bunch of guys, especially at their TV tapings. And then they were doing some advertising for some of the house shows, but this was the problem. We had a deal worked out where, say, $100 a week. I can't remember what it was. And if I worked over 2 days or whatever like that, then become extra money.
Sure.
Well, I told him I was willing to work as many days as possible. And then he would call me and say, hey, what about this weekend? Well, this weekend I'm already booked, but he'd already advertised me for, what was some of those towns? But I can't remember now, but outside New York a little bit. And then people started giving me the rap of doing the no-show, which I didn't know I was advertised. If I knew I was advertised, I would have made the show, because we were also trying to work a deal. If he could pay me, just say, up to $250,000 a year, then I was going to be a permanent figure.
Oh, okay.
So that's, he was trying to talk me into that, which I was trying to talk myself out of, because I was looking to go to one of the two big companies at the time.
Right. When you came into ECW, obviously you're the veteran when you walk in there. Were you willing to help a lot of the younger guys and maybe put over some younger guys along the way?
Well, you know what? Yeah. Let's see. I think sometimes the word veteran is overused and overexposed and used too loosely. I was, I think we all, it's all of our jobs, a beginner or, veteran, come in, this is how simple the business is. You come in, they spend a lot of time getting you over. You get into a process after that of maybe hopefully be in a position to draw money, get into the middle of something. And once you've had your run, it's given to give back. So then you put people over who will, hopefully help them, get up to the next level.
Sure. Were you surprised when you came into ECW at how well you were received by the fans?
I really was. I'll tell you, truthfully, it was one of the probably the second most fun I've had in the business.
Wow.
First most fun I think I ever had when I first started down in Continental. The reason why that was there, because no pressure. I didn't know what jealousy was. I didn't know people didn't like me because of, for whatever reason. So a lot of those things were hidden. But ECW, after knowing some of those things, those guys were all really nice to me. From Sabu to Rob Van Dam, One Man Gang, just all the guys there were just super, super cool to me, and went out of the way to really make me look good. And got to do, ECW is sort of like, Saturday Night Live.
Right.
You can get away with a lot more things than you could at 8 o'clock show. Like spitting and things like that, and the fans love that kind of stuff. And just that atmosphere was just ideal for me.
Sure. Now, when did you realize in your run there that the company was having some financial problems?
Well, I knew, talking to Paul, that they were struggling a little bit, because a lot of people weren't getting their money. A lot of people checks were bouncing, stuff like that. Even one of mine bounced, but I give you a story about it. One time I was doing an independent show for Michael Bryan, and they were doing a television taping at Harlem.
ECW?
Yeah.
Okay.
The little venue they always do, that little place. It was really nice. Well, I showed up unexpectedly.
Queens.
Queens.
Yeah, I had a question about that, but okay.
Well, I showed up, and Paul was freaking, because I was with Tommy Rogers. Tommy Rogers was owed some money as well. Of course, Tommy forced him to give him cash. I said, Paul, you can send me another check. I know, you've been good to me. I'm not here to worry about my money. I'm just here to drop in and say, what's going on? Why haven't you called me? You know, things like, why are you, I'm getting the rap of not doing no shows and you haven't told me that I was booked on any of these shows. And he was so paranoid he wouldn't let me, let anybody see me through the curtain and stuff like that. I think it sort of got blown out of proportion. I came there to strong arm some people, which I didn't. I came with Tommy Rogers, who's, a little bitty guy, myself. Right. And never even took any money. He sent me my money and the check was good.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I had a question about that because there was a story that you went there and strong on them for the money.
Well, believe it or not, like I said again, Tommy Rogers walked out with cash.
Okay.
He wouldn't take a check. I said, Paul, just write me another check, send it to me.
Yeah.
That's how little I cared about it.
Wow. One of the more memorable matches you had there is a match you had against the Dudleys. What do you remember about working with the Dudleys?
Was that at Asbury Park?
I believe it was.
Yeah, pay-per-view?
Yes.
Yeah, Sabu was involved. That's the thing about it is those guys all were, Bubba Dudley, and then it was Devon.
Right.
Devon was a really super nice guy. Bubba, a little bit of a prima donna. I hate saying that, but I don't know if it was, maybe he was jealous of me coming in. I don't know, maybe that's just his personality. I've got a personality that people take the wrong way too because I'm quiet to myself a lot, and try to get to know people. But they were a lot of fun to work with. Sabu, that made it a lot of fun too.
Cool.
And, this is what is bad about the business. I didn't realize it till at the end that they were setting me up for a table deal for Sabu. All they had to do is ask me. I don't mind. And if anybody really looks back and sees the things I've done, I have honestly volunteered to do more jobs than most people have done. Like, because especially if I was main event and they came with a DQ or a double count out, I said, no, I'm putting the guy over, especially as a heel. I said, this is not the way to end the show. So that's the thing is that they would just presented that to me and not try to sneak that in, I still would have done it.
Yeah. As not that I want to go in a different direction, but since you talked about as a heel, and you were one of the most successful heels in the business for your time period, are you surprised at the way that the heel in the business today has changed from being the cool heel to actually being the traditional heel in the role that you played for so many years and so successfully?
Yeah, I'll give you, I don't think a lot of people remember this. What they call that was a tweener.
Okay.
Or in between babyface and heel. And that was somebody who could work with babyfaces and heels. I was the very first one really to take that role on when I won the belt from Shawn Michaels. And what it was, I was told I was going to be a babyface for an extended period of time. Then after that, heel, et cetera, et cetera. Well, a lot of people don't realize actually that was supposed to be Shawn and Vader in that match.
Okay.
But I'd worked with Vader in a house show at the Gardens prior to that and got such a reaction from the people. When I walked out, Vince was standing there. I knew without a word that he changed his mind who was going to be in that spot.
Wow.
No, they came to me saying, we're going to put you in this. We're going to let Vader go over tonight because we're going next time we're here, he's going to be beating Shawn. And then at the pay-per-view in Indianapolis, you'll put Vader over to, for him to meet Shawn at SummerSlam. I said, fine. That's perfect. And so when I walked out that night through the walkway there, I looked on Vince's face. I knew it was changed. So it was a month or so later, we're in Indianapolis, get ready for the pay-per-view, and they pulled me over to the side. Hey, things have changed, and I told them what things had changed too. I knew it. Yeah. You just get those kind of feelings. Yeah,
and you actually did the tweener role as well in the middle of the Bret Hart, Steve Austin stuff too.
Right, and that was a little, for me too as a heel. When it was just heels and just baby faces, I was always a tweener, especially up in the northern market. I was always perceived or cheered, and the baby faces hated that, having to work with a guy. And I don't know if you know this yourself, but if you're a baby face and you got 10,000 people cheering you, you got one person booing you, it really blows your mind. Not mine. It does bother some people.
Right.
I've seen people like Bill Goldberg just literally go nuts, cussing the person, shut up. I said, hey man. And then he's working with me, and we get north, and more people booing. But I like that. As a heel, it's acceptable. You accept the cheers and the boos. But that's always been my favorite role, is the heel.
Did you find that with Shawn, when you were working with Shawn back then, that he would get real frazzled when the crowd would start going nuts for you?
Not Shawn.
Okay.
Not Shawn. Shawn was I don't know if people know Shawn as well or not. Shawn is he's a giver.
Okay.
He gives out, he gives to you. He makes me, like when we were triple threat matches, me and him and Bret.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying, I've said it before, working with Bret was like pulling teeth.
You said that in the last shoot interview.
Yeah, and Shawn, when he saw that, me and Shawn would look at each other, we just sort of say, hey, we'll work around this. And Shawn would go out of his way to really make me look super cool in the match. I'd do the same for him, and we'd do the same for Bret as well.
Wow. Going back, wrapping up with ECW, if the money issues weren't a problem and the advertising wasn't a problem, would you have stayed there for a while?
Yeah, I really could have, man, because it's sort of the same scenario that's going on with TNA now. You weren't, the workload was a lot less, and then it was a lot more fun. And I don't know what TNA's like, but I'm saying I know the workload was less. But working for ECW, man, it was like starting over from the small territory days, but you were making really good money.
Now, what were your thoughts on Paul as a booker? Because you went back with him to Continental.
Yeah. I thought Paul was a heck of a booker myself. And again, he had no reason to do anything but, treat me as a regular employee or a regular, one of the boys. And, he did, in my opinion, everything perfect with me, to build up to really draw some money. And he was doing it right.
Now, then you wound up returning to WCW at some point, and I know in the last interview that we did, you seemed more towards going back to the WWE than you were to WCW. So how did that come about?
Well, I just got a call. What it was, after doing ECW for a little bit, of course, at the time, Kevin Nash and Scott Hall and those guys were, Kevin was booking. Good friend of mine, him and Scott said, hey, let's get this guy in here. He's back. Looks good, and there's no sense of letting him go. And Eric Bischoff gives me a call, has a private meeting, flies in his own plane there in West Memphis, where I'm from, and we met and talked, and it was a done deal.
Yeah. Now, did you see this when you went into WCW? Did you see this as some kind of vindication towards the way that things were left with the WWE? Because in the last interview, you said you wanted to prove something to Vince and come back and do your thing.
I think sometimes when we're angry or upset, and I try to take this business as it really is, and even though I do, I still get upset about things I shouldn't get upset about, and I get upset at Vince, and I feel like I was shafted a little bit there, but then again, I felt like I was treated pretty fair on top of everything too. It's more of a business than WCW.
Sure.
Only thing about it is I never really could prove anything or say get back at Vince so much work for WCW, only that I couldn't work for him. Because what the really turn on about working for Vince was, if things went right, then you got to feel the power of drawing people, and that to me is more addictive than cash flow or anything. Wow. To know that you walk in that building and the majority of people say thanks for the house, and you were a big part of it because you know what it was before you came into the town before, and they tell you, and to me, I've not ever seen a company that can do that for anyone else like they can. How many other companies that had, like back when I was last worked for them before I had broke my neck, we were selling out everywhere. We even sold out next at Detroit. Me and Bret in a cage match, just a house show when the Detroit Red Wings were next door in the last game of the Stanley Cup. So when things are good like that, man, that's so rewarding.
People, and let me ask your opinion on this. People talk about, the change and the ratings war and everything, and a lot of people point to Steve Austin and Bret Hart. My opinion is the cage match that you had with Bret on Raw at the end of the year that year was really the turning point with the result and just the way you saw Austin interfere and the cursing at the end. Do you look back on that and think the same, that match was very pivotal to the change in business? I
think that and the whole beginning up, when I took the title from Shawn, I think from then on was the big change for the business. Is that's when we saw that, we could have a tweener like myself, and I could work with Undertaker one night or Shawn the next night. Then I could work with Bret. I could work with Steve Austin. I could work with heels like Mankind. Me and Mankind had no issue at all. Was at Nassau, sold the place out. I know it was a good house. I think the time before that I was just advertised. Actually, they sort of did a swerve. They were trying to make the people believe Bret Hart was coming out.
Okay.
And that's when Jim Anvil Neidhart came out.
Okay.
And the house wasn't that great that night. The next time around, I'm the world champ, working against Mick, and sold the place out.
Wow.
And people like Pat Patterson, who I have a lot of respect for, he reluctantly had to look at me and say, "Hey, man, you really are the man."
Now, coming back into WCW, and we went into it in a lot of detail on the last shoot. Did you have to resolve any issues with Arn Anderson before you started coming back to the shows?
They brought me in the very first night in Baltimore, that pay-per-view, as a mystery partner, and I was even wearing a hood and a black suit, long sleeves and stuff like that. And then they said, "We're not going to do this mystery thing. We're going to let you come out, and then we're going to take your hood off, and we want everybody to know who you are." So they pulled me and Arn to a room, and because no one knew I was coming, other than Eric, really, and maybe a few office people. And a lot of people don't realize about this whole thing of Arn. And I've said it before, Arn was one of the people who really helped me out in my career. He's the one who first, helped me out with my interviews, which is a big part of my persona, my character. It was just an unfortunate chain of events that led into that horrible night. Of course, Arn has gone on record that I've heard has always had great things to say about me. I've always had great things to say about him. And one thing I could do, and I have said, and I've said it 1,000 times, and I just wish it never had happened. And if it had to happen, I wish it hadn't been with him. It was just a horrible accident. No, not an accident. It was just a horrible, horrible deal.
Right. And so when you went in the room with Arn, everything was cool with you guys?
Everything was cool. Arn was an agent. He used to, Arn always gave me the greatest, most respect. Whenever we were going to finishes, he'd ask me my opinion. I'd always ask him because I know he can make finishes real exciting. I think him and Ric Flair may be some of the best finish men in the business, coming up with the little bitty things that don't sound like that much, but man, it turned out to really make the whole match. I can give you one, for example, when me and Flair was working against Piper and Hogan.
Okay.
And I forget how it went, but the finish went for a cover on Hogan and Piper won, and Hogan was going to cover Flair. I was coming to whack him, pull him over, and let Flair do it, then kick out, then finally catch the falling Rick. All Rick added to that was a chair shot. And then it made the whole finish. I mean, it went from blah to wow. And I just, when you sit back and you think you know a little bit about the business, you go, man, that one little thing's not going to make that big of a difference. But man, it did.
Wow.
It really did.
Wow. Now, being back in WCW for the first time in many years, how did things change in WCW since the last time you were there?
Really not at all.
Wow.
Then it got to be a bigger production. Everything was on a bigger scale. Our vignettes, our little things like, I'll give you an example. That time me and Randy Savage was trying to get Gorgeous George away from Kevin Nash.
Okay.
Man, it looked like not a small movie set. It looked like a movie set. They had all the,
right.
That's something that they really was doing really a lot of really big high production things.
Wow. Now, you and Arn squashed everything. Did you sense any heat from maybe some of Arn's friends that didn't want you back?
Not want me back in WCW. Now, when it first happened, there was a lot of people that didn't want me back there because it would happen.
Right.
But after the time had gone by, those people have forgotten it. I can't think of anyone. Okay. Now, I only can go by what I've heard. I've heard Ric Flair said some bad things about me, I guess because they just did this Horsemen.
We're going to talk about that, yeah.
Okay, well, we'll talk about it when it gets there.
Yeah, definitely. I would love to get your thoughts on that. Now, at the time you were in WCW, at this time, was Vince Russo in charge, or was it just Eric?
When I first got there, it was just Eric, and then Vince Russo came in.
Okay. Now, did things change for you at all because of course, one guy has his guys, the next guy has his guys?
Well, it wasn't so much, and that was something else. I've always been one easy to get along with, and as time went on and I got more mature, I was even easier to get along with. So that makes me viable and someone worth working with. So Vince Russo was, attached to me right away.
Okay.
And we knew each other from the WWF days. The only thing is, and I'm sure you'll ask it, but I'll go ahead and throw it out there.
Sure.
I just thought, Vince Russo, first of all, wasn't the genius everybody put him out to be. And he did such a poor job, or a different type of job, that we all thought it was sabotage. No one could be this bad consistently. I'll give you an example. We're in Little Rock, and that's my home state. And when I come out, they'd start the hog chant. And he had me come out. Kevin was dressed up like Vince McMahon, and Scott was dressed up like someone else. I can't remember who it was. And they wanted me to come out and say the line was like this: "I'm not as dumb as I'm not as dumb as you think I'm dumb." So, something really stupid.
Yeah.
And then I said, "Is this really what you want me to say? Because this isn't going to help us draw money."
Yeah.
But Bill, what was the guy's name?
Bill Bush.
Bill Bush. He come in. Now, Sid, you're one of the leaders here. I'm asking you to do everything they ask, because if you do it, then it'll look like everyone should do it.
Mm-hmm.
So I always had that, and I don't mind. That's part of the deal. And if I'm that well respected by the big guy, I'm saying I'm gonna do what you're asking me because you're paying me a lot of money. So I did it,
Yeah.
And those were silly things. I just didn't think that had any reason to be part of anything. It was a waste of time. Television is so important.
Yeah.
I could have, but that's hindsight.
As a wrestler in the company, as somebody who's been around the business for a long time, what did you think when the whole David Arquette debacle went down and he was wearing the WCW belt?
I don't have a problem with that, believe it or not. I know the business, and I've seen it, and the only way it's going to get better is we have change. And Vince was the first person to use entertainers
Mm-hmm.
in the business to draw money or make things exciting or bring a different group of viewers to the scene. So I didn't really have a problem with it.
Okay. Now, when you came into WCW, you were paired with Randy Savage.
Mm-hmm.
What are your thoughts on being paired with Randy for a while?
It was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
I've always really enjoyed being by myself. I had a great time, of course, in my early years working with Danny Spivey and tagging up with the Horsemen and stuff like that and things like that. But working with Randy it was probably a little more fun than the rest of them. He was it was funny too. I know you've heard the stories about interviews. When
Sure.
you're doing an interview with Randy, he's always got to try to end the interview. I don't care how many seconds it lasts. I went, and we're done. And yeah, so this was like. Who was really fun to watch do that with him was Scott Hall. Scott would never stop. He'd go, "Oh yeah," and "you'll buy back," and it was a never-ending deal. They had to redo the interview because 2 minutes over. But other than that, I mean, we had a lot of fun. He was, was talking the story to Dallas Page earlier. I worked with Randy some house shows. Most of the time I worked with Randy, he was substituting for someone who didn't show up.
Okay.
And usually, especially in WWE, baby faces go over every night. And if there's a replacement, the baby face for sure goes over.
Right.
Randy comes over and says, I said, "What's going to do now?" He goes, "I'm taking the Powerbomb." Because they were building me for Hogan for WrestleMania at that point.
Okay.
So Randy's a businessman.
Yeah.
He's got little weird things. We're all weird in our own ways. I'm called weird because I don't party, go to bed early, I get up early, I work out twice a day on the road. It's unheard of. So, we all have our little
Gotcha. Intricacies.
Intricacies or little weird points.
When you came in, they were calling you the Millennium Man. And at the same time, in the WWE, Chris Jericho was calling himself the Millennium Man. And he even did an interview where he wasn't pointing a finger at you, but just WCW by saying they're ripping me off. Were you aware of that whole deal?
I didn't even know what J2K or whatever that was about.
Y2J. Yeah.
I didn't know that. After they started the Millennium thing, I picked up on it.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't tell me, so I picked up on it. But I know they were just trying to get back at Jericho for leaving.
Yeah.
And so that's part of it.
Yeah.
But I really wasn't aware of it until after I had done it a few times. I didn't even put it to because he didn't come out with Y2J till way after I started talking about Millennium. Because it was a build up for him.
Right.
So I was already doing it while he was still there.
That's right. He
was just finished his daytime.
Gotcha. Now, when you were there after a couple of weeks, maybe a month or so, what was your impression of the politics, the office politics in WCW?
I thought they were upgraded a little bit from the time before. They got a little silly with that computer thing about putting your fingerprint in.
What did they have you do with the fingerprint?
Well, it was you put your ring finger on, and it sent a message directly to the office at what time you checked in. I thought, here it is, we're trying to save money, and they're doing things like this, But I didn't mind because I'm usually the first one there anyway. I'm gonna put my finger down and put my bags down. If I want to go somewhere, I'm gonna go somewhere.
Right. And Hogan, Hogan was a big player there, all the way up until the very end. Had Hogan changed at all, personally, professionally, since the years earlier where you worked with him?
You know what? I can't really say. No, he hadn't changed because he was always really good to me. And our matches were always real easy. It wasn't wasn't pulling teeth. He wouldn't, so no, he didn't change towards me.
Yeah. Have you ever watched Hogan Knows Best?
I've seen a little bit of it.
What do you think?
My opinion, I think, is bad for him.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, and I'll give you a good example. One of the things that exposes him is as an old man. He walks around old, looks old, talks old, talks all about his bad points. Then, they were in Memphis just a month ago.
Yep.
And here it is. They were on every radio station, every live television station, everything. He was talking about how now he's got a new viewing audience from VH1, Hogan Knows Best, and they barely did 2,000 people in a 25,000 seat arena.
Yeah, it's been the talk of business for a couple of weeks. Yeah,
it was really horrible. But they picked I think what they should have done is stuck what they were supposed to have done. And that was work the angle, which is not really an angle, but it was supposed to have been the last wrestling show at the Mid-South Coliseum. And they would have pulled in some of the people at the place they went to. It cost $10 to park.
Wow.
And then it was so much to get in, and it wasn't well done. They did no promotional stuff till the day or a few days before the show.
Did they contact you at all to do anything on the show?
They asked me about it. I told them I wasn't interested unless I was main event.
Yeah. And
then at the Coliseum, and then they moved it to the Forum, FedEx Forum, and of course, Vince said anybody who works for that show will never work for me, and that's where I'm trying to get to.
Yeah.
So I wasn't interested.
Now you had a series of matches with your buddy Kevin Nash when you came into WCW. What do you remember back about the series of matches you had with him?
Kevin is he's a real relaxed person, no pressures. He was really trying to make me build me up, to work with Goldberg. So he was really going out of his way to, do well with me. They were, not classic matches. You know what I mean? They weren't, but and I don't really remember working with him only in a scene. I can't remember where it was, but it was like it was a really hard crowd. We never really worked. And if we were scheduled to work somehow or another, he'd change around when we were tagging together. And so that was the one thing about WCW there, and WWE too, but WCW is more fragrant, more often that they would just, Kevin was in charge. If he wanted to, put me and him together as a tag team partner against the Harlem Heat, and like in Phoenix one night, that's what he did.
Yeah.
Just
as a student of the game and being in the business for as long as you have, do you think that's one of the main things that changed the tide of the wrestling, more and more people tuning into Raw? Because WCW would advertise these main events, and then they would either get 60 seconds or they would never get the match they were advertising and expecting to see.
When you asked that question, I was going back to another one you'd asked earlier again. Ask it again.
About WCW, and you were talking about how Kevin, you guys would be booked to wrestle each other, but then you'd wind up tagging. And, a lot of people point to that as a big reason that business went down in WCW, especially in ratings, because they would advertise these big matches.
Okay, the ratings too. Let's get I think that had a little bit to do with it. I think also it had to do with just the timing. They had just come off that big run where they were, killing Vince and the ratings and stuff. I was working for Vince when that was going on, but we were out drawing them in the house shows. And that's why I went to Vince. And I'll give you an example. One time, here it was, I was just coming in, and they wanted me to get DQ'd or something by Ron Simmons when he was the Farouk. And I said, I was really upset. I said, because you guys promised me this big run as a baby face, and you put me in a tournament I can't even win. I said, this didn't make sense. He goes, see, we're trying to do this for ratings. I told Vince right there, I said, Vince, I don't believe ratings mean that much, because we're beating them in the house shows, and that's what our job is to do, is draw money. And I think what you're doing to me here is taking away from me what I can draw. So now, that was to get to the ratings. Talk about that for just a second, but get to the question would be, no, I don't really think it was that. I think it didn't help for sure, but I think they were already on a downhill skid, because I know that going in, because that's why they were, I remember the ratings when I got there, and I was putting something always to, try to help the ratings, and we kept it right there, a miserable 2.9, 2.7 to once in a while a 3 or whatever.
Yeah. And in WCW, it had the reputation, and guys, that we've done interviews with have talked about it. There were some guys there, and, all kinds of names have been thrown around, that just mailed it in. And a lot of the guys that took pride in what they do would get very frustrated working with certain guys. Did you find that there were some guys that would just mail it in?
And there's a lot of guys that then in the business, both territories that would do that. I hated that, and I hate to be put in a position like that. Someone say, okay, let's do a Code Fresno, or, we'd done a show, say one time when we were trying to make a 3-hour drive to Sacramento to catch a red eye to get home that night. So instead of, but I'll tell you this too now, and I know this was in WWF, when I worked with Vader and I worked with these other guys, we had some really long matches because we had it really down and things were going really good. And they would come to me sometimes and ask me to shorten it up. And I wouldn't, because I felt like if it was right and it was good and I had the people, I was the last match, I didn't give a damn what time those agents got out of there. Yeah. But that is true. That a lot of people do want to just call it in and go through the drive-through and get out. And but the thing is about that is that that's really bad for the business, especially when you're trying to build a business or get a territory going back or get it back up. Well, the one way to do that is work harder than you ever worked before.
Did you, maybe with a younger guy in WCW, did you ever find yourself in a situation where you had to say, no, we are going to do it this way because? Yeah,
and I did with older guys too.
Okay.
I'll give you an example. Me and Savage were working against Dean Malenko and Chris Benoit, or one of those, couple guys like that right there. Now I've been told by the office, by Eric, not to come off my feet for anybody, to be real aggressive and do my deal, get over, because if I don't get over to work with Goldberg, it's not going to matter.
Right.
It's not. So we were in some Louisiana place, and Dean Malenko said, hey, Sid, I do a really good drop Toho. And Savage was standing there. I said, no, Dean, this is how it's going to work. You're going to come in. I'm going to boot you to the face. I'm going to beat the shit out of you. You tagged out, and I'm going to beat your other buddy up a little bit, and I'm going to powerbomb both of you. I'm going to get 2 victories. And I've done that not just with those guys, I did with a lot of guys, because it's business.
Sure.
And if I didn't do, and I've done it before where I, sort of went along with the program, and then once I got out of there, I was pulled to the side, said, look, this is what they see you on TV. If you don't show that to these people in the house shows, it was just the same as a no-show. And that's the way it really is. If they see this, personality on TV, and all of a sudden they see this guy on his knees begging for, forgiveness from a guy who's 4 foot, that's a no-show.
Yeah. Did you find that a lot, a difference? Because you seem like the kind of guy that you look to the future when you're looking at what you're going to do with this guy next and next. Did you find with younger guys, they were more concerned about getting their spots in a match, where you're concerned about, hey, I'm looking towards the future?
Well, that's something too, is really, the business has changed in this, they call them comedy spots, pops.
Right.
The thing about, for me, and I learned this through over the years, I've been really fortunate to have come across and worked directly with some of the best minds in this business, and not just bookers, but guys who also were workers. And I think it's a lot harder, and this is what I used to do to people, to stand for a solid minute and never move and make that other person do the same thing. Now that, to me, is harder and more uncomfortable than trying to get that cheap pop.
Right.
But if you do that, you're able to do that, and of course, my style is a little different than a lot of people anyway. I could, like, Shawn, Sting, guys like that, especially when I was straight uphill, I could give them one thing, and I said, okay, now just crawl away from me. And when they would crawl, all I had to do is stalk and then stop, look at the people, and it was there.
Yeah.
You know, it's the same as grabbing a hold. You know, you have to find different ways to get the same objective. But, you know, you can find different ways to do it. And I was, years ago, guy told me, he said, man, you remind me a lot of Johnny Valiant. And I said, what? He said, well, I want you to do something tonight. And what they wanted me to do was just after I guess it was probably wasn't a finish, or maybe it wasn't finishing the match, but you're the heel, walk out. As you get down that aisle, stop, you know, then turn around and just stand there as long as you can stand there. Take one step back towards the ring and then fucking go back to the ring, to the dressing room.
Yeah.
And when you're able to do things like that and control people's emotions by taking one step, that to me is much greater than doing 50 high spots.
Wow. We did an interview with Bruno Sammartino a couple weeks ago, and I do a radio show, and I have Bruno on a lot. And
I love it.
Me too. He's a good friend of mine, and we've talked about how he says that on the indies and just in modern wrestling nowadays, that they can never do what they did in his day and what you did in your day by coming back with the rematch and building up, because the indies, they throw everything out there in one shot, that you can never go back to the same town every month or whatever. Do you kind of agree with what he says in that respect?
I do. I think too, and not just the indies. I think all organizations now are so set up on a quick fix. You know, where, for instance, you know, when I worked for Vince the very first time, we sort of knew what I was going to do for 1 year. You know, now they don't really know. You know, I just told you a story about me and Vader and Shawn.
Right.
That happened, that changed. Of course, sometimes changes like that are good because I'm going to draw more money than Vader.
Sure.
And so that worked out good. But for the most part, they do that, but it's forced now because they have a pay-per-view once a month. And instead of, you know, really trying, I think, because again, I think their minds are so caught up in that damn rating thing that they don't think they can keep a rating by keeping the same issue going. That's the only thing I can think of.
Yeah. And you mentioned his name, Sting, and you wrestled him quite a bit the first time you were in WCW. Now you're wrestling him a lot then. How did things change, the matches change with you guys?
You know, they never got, if there was any change, it just got better. You know, Sting is so unselfish. He's another person like Shawn, so giving. In my opinion, the greatest, purest babyface ever in this business. He knew how to fire up. He had a great personality. He knew how to, you know, let the heel get his heat. He was very comfortable with it, you know. And then he just, you know, just wanted, you know, I've said this before too. Not upset with him, but I'm upset for him that he never got the chance. He still has a chance to really get up to WWE and really get what he should receive in this business, and that's be in front of 70,000 people and be a part of that.
Yeah.
But that's why I don't know if you could do it now, have been watered down so much at TNA.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, we touched on it briefly, but I want to ask you here. The WWE, they just put a Horsemen DVD out.
Right.
And Arn Anderson, on his comments on you, he said you did great interviews. He said you were very powerful, but you weren't a team player. How do you respond to that? You know,
this is what happened there, and this is why they're all saying I'm not team players. No, they asked me to do that video or that DVD.
Okay.
The Horseman deal. Well, as a matter of fact, I've been trying to negotiate a new deal with these folks.
Okay.
And I told them straight up that I've got plans, and if I do get to come back, I don't want to water myself down with something I really had nothing to do with the Horsemen.
Right.
And if I do come back, I don't want them to see that first. I want them to see me and maybe a new character.
Right.
I might be. You know what I mean?
Yeah, because you've been out of the spotlight.
Right. I could do a different character.
Exactly.
and one I've got a really good idea for one. So that's one reason I think him and Flair had a couple bad things to say about me about not being a team player, because I wasn't interested in doing the Horseman thing. And that's something you got to realize that means a lot to them, because they really was the foundation of that.
Yeah.
I was honored to be a part of it, but I never felt like that was my career.
Yeah. And Ric Flair was very harsh on you, and he called you an embarrassment and said, he's an embarrassment. I want to make sure that you keep this on the DVD.
You know what? I have to say, Rick, face to face, has only been good to me. Okay? All right. Saying that, first when I hear that, it sounds like a little disappointment from him, because they're saying, no, they could have twisted it to him, arm this different way. But well, Sid just now, we begged him and we told him we'd pay him. He just didn't want to have nothing to do with this thing and blah, blah, blah. It sounds like a little bit of someone, their feelings were hurt there.
Sure.
Now, being a disappointment or embarrassment to his business.
That's his quote, an embarrassment.
Okay, let's just say this. Who really is the bigger embarrassment in this business? And that's all I'll say.
Yeah.
Is it someone who, like me, who's only had really only one, thing over my head that was really not my fault, or him who's had a cast of stupid things he's done his whole life. But on the other side of it, he's a great entertainer, for what he is. But for him to, have been that jealous, it could have been a lot of things. I don't mind saying this. In this business, since I've been in it, I've outdone Ric Flair 100 to 1 in drawing money. And that's what the name of the game is. I've been main event where he had been really main event for a long time. I was main event 90% of my career, so even more than that. And when I wasn't main event, they put me in the main event anyway, because Ric Flair and those people couldn't follow me. So if there were anything, it sounded like to me someone's feelings were hurt. Team player, Arn has to know I'm a team player because he worked as an agent. When I was in, worked for WCW, they'd come to me. I did a job every night.
Right.
I never had a problem with that. So it sounds like just a little problem with everyone that I didn't do the Horseman thing.
Gotcha. Now, back to WCW, were you surprised that, some people think they gave away a lot of money by putting so many of those matches you had with Hogan on free TV rather than saving it for pay-per-view?
In WCW?
Yes.
You know what? This is I don't really believe that, because we never had a singles match, or if we did, it was always...
You did on Nitro a couple times.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The thing about that is, I don't believe that, first of all, I wasn't in an angle with him when I was doing those matches. I was shooting for the big deal with Goldberg.
Right.
But now when me and Hogan shot our first angle, it was down in Miami, when I turned on him and we were scheduled to come back in the pay-per-view at Daytona, was the first time they ever had like a $300,000 advance.
Wow.
Now, they pulled me out of that, put Jeff Jarrett in there. Now, that goes to show that it didn't hurt. We would have sold that place out.
Right.
And really very little issue.
Yeah.
And that's something, too. There's several people in this business that I'm almost automatically going to draw money with, and he's one of them, or used to be.
Yeah, you guys had some real good chemistry together.
Yeah. And it's because we both were able to give. He was always doing for me. His style is real easy. It's like doing a Three Stooges gig. That's what he calls it. He does his face,
Yeah.
That's how that's his comeback, and it's real simple, and the people buy it.
Yeah. Where did I leave off here? In our last shoot interview, you've talked about Goldberg a couple of times. In our last shoot interview that we did with you, Goldberg was just starting to break, and we talked a little bit about Goldberg, and you said you wished you could work a little with him behind the scenes. Did you ever get the opportunity behind the scenes to give him some advice on his character and that kind of thing?
Yeah, I did. I've talked to him a few times about some things. This is not saying I'm right about this. I'll give you an example. We were working together. He was hurt. There wasn't a lot he could do, and he had a couple moves that he felt comfortable doing. So I set up a few spots to where we came into him differently, like duck a clothesline or this or that, or turn around that he wasn't, he gave me whatever this bump he was doing. He says, we already did that. Wow, this guy's a little lost.
Yeah.
Because what do you mean we can't lock up more than one time, can't do more than one, headlock.
Yeah.
To me, that's so juvenile. I'm not juvenile, but That's the wrong word. But he just wasn't experienced.
Yeah.
He was the first to admit that, though, too. Okay, he was the first to say, "Hey, I don't know what I'm really doing out here," because he had experience like I had or Hogan had, and things like that. And two, Bill was really being taken advantage of from a lot of people, that were able to take advantage of him. So he had that little worry. Maybe that was happening to him.
Yeah.
I do remember one story. It's sort of funny, but this goes along with beginners. Okay, we were coming out of Detroit one time, and this when the finger thing was first implemented.
Okay.
And so I was asking him. We were talking about that, and he says to me, "Sid, if I could just go 1 year or 5 years more without anybody kicking out of the
his jackhammer thing.
jackhammer,
Yeah.
the jackknife deal,
Yeah.
hammer jack, whatever you call it." He said, "I'll be okay." I thought to myself, "Bill, you want someone to kick out of that because that'll make money."
Yeah.
So, but he didn't know that.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, are you the kind of a guy, because you've been around the business for so long, you're the kind of guy that likes to call your stuff in the ring, or are you the kind of guy that likes to lay everything out beforehand?
Well, and that's it all depends who you're working with.
Mm-hmm.
I always try to, get an idea, if I don't know the person, how long they've been working, things like that. But usually in house shows, you're working with people that are you've known before and have worked with before. And then everybody's got their own way too. Some people like Vader, he wanted everything laid out before we went out there. And every once in a while, I'd call a spot, just something different. And man, we got to the dressing room, he went, not ballistic on me, but like, "Sid, I'm making you look great. Don't ever do that to me again." I go, "Okay." Now, working with people like Bobby Eaton, Bam Bam Bigelow, who I consider the greatest ring general I ever worked with.
Wow.
And I don't think people really know that about him. He was so smooth and so quick here to pick up on something. Well, this isn't working. It worked last night in front of that crowd, but it's not working here. So let's change this. He was so good at that. We never had a bad match.
Wow.
And a workhorse, too.
Wow. Now, people in various interviews have said that in WCW, they never knew who was in charge. Is that an accurate statement?
That's really accurate. Even when you did know who was in charge, they weren't in charge. And there's a good, and we all know this story. When they were all boycotting and trying to sign petitions to get rid of Kevin Sullivan to bring back Vince Russo.
Right.
And I was a part of that and didn't even know it myself. And what happened was had dropped the belt to Scott Benoit. And of course, his leg or my leg was under the rope.
Right.
I was told to do that. I didn't know why. But they, the next night, they put the belt back on me through Kevin Nash.
Mm-hmm.
I just, they asked me about would I put my name on that petition, things like that. I'm just not interested in that.
Yeah.
I think the office should know who they want in that position. I don't think Vince Russo was doing that great of a job.
Yeah.
I think everybody else was doing just as well. I think Kevin was doing a better job than anybody else at one time. So I just don't, and I don't like that part of it. I don't want to worry about who, we know Bush was the boss and Ted Turner owned the company. Those were the only two things I really needed to worry about.
You're the kind of guy that you just want to show up, do your job, honestly, and go home.
I show up. I don't even know who I'm working with.
Yeah.
I showed up here for this thing. I didn't remember the guy's first name. I just, I don't like those hassles. It's not a hassle. It's just, I don't worry with stuff like that. I get there, who am I working with? Okay, what's the finish? Okay, let's do it. Let's have a great time. Let's entertain the people. I always want to have the best match of the night.
Yeah. Scott Hall, it's been said that he could be difficult to work with because you don't know what kind of Scott Hall you're going to get on a given night, and you worked with him in WCW. Did you find that?
No. Scott is also, he's sort of our Dennis Rodman of wrestling. Mm-hmm. He's going to show up sometimes with a couple beers in his gut, maybe something else, but it never affected his performance. Not with me. He always worked his ass off. It was always man, he took that power bomb as well as a 90-pound person did. Mm-hmm. He was really a great working big man.
Yeah.
And people don't realize how big he was, I think.
Wow. Did you question, we were just talking about it, did you question when they put the belt on Benoit in that match where you put your leg on, yet it had been rumored everywhere that he wanted to leave? Did you find that kind of odd? That
I did. I didn't even know it until the day before, the day of the match, and Terry Taylor was an agent at the time. told me that in the gym, and I was really upset for the first, not upset, but I was, confused and a little pissed off, thinking, now, two things. One, we know this rumor about them signing a petition, trying to, start whatever. That just doesn't go in this business. The other two is, Chris is a hard worker, but he's never going to be a big money draw. And so for him to take the belt off me and not have, say, put it on someone better, I thought that was a mistake.
Yeah. And you're staying and he's leaving.
Right.
So.
And I'm there. I'm doing everything the company's asked for. I'm not trying to start my own union or my own petition of people that, I only want this guy to work here because he only does good things for us. And
right.
The whole thing was, it was him, Benoit, Malenko, Perry Saturn, Shane Douglas.
I think Conan might have been involved.
Conan, he was.
Yeah.
All these smaller guys that never going to reach the potential of the big guy, they wanted that spot. And through Russo, they were going to get it. Because, and that was his link in trying to keep his job.
Yeah.
He had that, that little following. But it didn't work out.
Wow. Now, you and Arn were cool at that point, so there were no issues with him being the referee or anything like that?
Never.
Yeah. Do you, what was I going to ask here? Your thoughts on Kevin Sullivan as a booker at the time. You thought he did a pretty good job?
I think he did an okay job. I'll just give you an example of things I didn't agree with. One of them was this. Me and Rick Steiner were working against someone like Perry Saturn and
Malenko.
It was
like
one of those two guys.
Yeah.
It was a tag team thing. And, I don't know if you know this now. Rick was pretty much considered like the locker room champion.
Yeah.
His career, and I told Rick this several times, his career was held back because of his people being scared of him. Even the bookers and owners of territories. So it's like when we came in, Kevin goes, "Hey, you gotta just kill him." That's not the business way of doing things. Not those things I disagreed with Kevin about.
Yeah.
Kevin had a pretty good mind, but there were better people for the job.
Gotcha. Now, you wrestled a little bit with Terry Funk in WCW. What do you remember about working with the Funker?
Well, he's a fun guy to work with, but it was a little frustrating. I'm taking one shot to the head with a chair, and I'm out cold, and I look up, and this guy's taking 52 shots. Still standing. I'm the world champion.
Yeah.
Other than that, and that's being, picky, and I'm not a picky person. That doesn't bother me. That's his gimmick, and I love that. And it was an honor. To work with him.
Thoughts on Tank Abbott? He seemed kind of like a square in a round hole kind of deal.
You know what? Tank was, believe it or not, was a really nice guy. He could have made life hard for people. I know he's a pretty tough guy. I don't know exactly how tough, but when they put him in with me that time, and it was just a little nerve-wracking knowing this guy could go off on you.
Right.
Not scared of him, but you don't. If you've got your hands down, he hits you.
Yeah.
Anybody can be knocked out. And I was checking in that night, and the bar was way down from the lobby, and he was hollering down at me, "Hey, motherfucker!" Blah, 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 whatever.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, oh God, just get this deal over with. But we pulled a good rating. He did a really good job.
Yeah.
And he did what was asked of him. I think he was pretty good.
That's what I was going to ask you. Do you think that any of the guys, well, you just answered it, were afraid he would go off? Because, not even so much afraid, but you guys are wrestling business guys, and here's this loose cannon that go off at any minute.
Right. Well, you know what? I don't ever remember anybody having that issue or that conversation ever being brought up.
Oh, okay.
I really don't.
Okay. And was he easy to take criticism if you said, "Hey, let's do it like this," or "I think you should try that"?
Yeah, he was real good about that.
That's good. I'm curious for your thoughts on this. Dan Severn, when he was in WWE, he did an interview with us, and he said that he thought on his way out, Royal Rumble was one of his last shows, and he said he thought to himself, what would they do if I just started shooting in there and just started throwing everybody over the top and taking over? What do you think about something like that?
I think it's silly.
Yeah.
First of all, I don't think, I don't know Dan that well. I just met him once or twice. He's not going to pick me up and throw me out of the ring. I've wrestled with a lot better wrestlers than him.
Yeah.
I'm talking, you know, Olympic wrestling.
Sure.
So I could hold my own a little bit. That wouldn't have been a good idea, especially if you had, some people in there that knew what they were doing as well.
Yeah.
And they would have picked up on it. The remaining people in that ring would have really gave it to him. But I think when you're a person like that, and your whole life is really circled around real, I think that has to come across your mind. Like you said, he said he would want to do it on his way out.
Yeah.
But what happens in that, when we're silly enough or stupid enough to, broadcast that, you're never going to be in a position to do that.
Yeah.
They're going to set you up with somewhere like they did Bart Gunn. Bart really wasn't scheduled to win that Brawl for Raw, whatever Brawl for Brawl for All.
Yeah. We just did an interview with Bart a month ago, and we talked a lot about it. And he said that the winner was supposed to get a match with Steve Austin and so on and so forth. And he said he went to the bookers and said, hey, let me just, work this thing. And they were like, no, go out there. And then when he won, it kind of shocked them. And he said he was willing to do whatever they wanted.
Well, that's funny you said that, because I heard just the opposite. I heard they sort of asked him not to beat Steve Williams. That Steve Williams, we all know, was the guy that they were scheduling or working up to go against Steve Austin. Yeah. And
that he said he would put Steve Williams over,
right.
and let Steve Williams do his deal with Steve Austin.
Well, if Bart says that, that's got to be the truth. Bart is one of the most honest guys you're going to hear.
Yeah.
Or talk to. Now I heard it was just the opposite. That he didn't want. He said, "Hey, look, I'm going for the money. Whoever wins this thing gets $50,000 or whatever." That's what he was going for. Because he told me, or Billy told me about it. Said, Jim Ross came to him supposedly. But if Bart says that he offered to do it, that's probably what happened.
He said, well, you'll get a kick out of this since you brought this up. He said that he showed up at television and all the guys were coming up to him and said, hey, I heard you said you're going to go out there and knock Steve Williams out. I heard you're going to knock Steve Williams out. And he said he never said it, and Bruce Pritchard was just stirring up the pot.
That's probably true.
Yeah.
That's probably true.
Because he said he was really surprised when all these people were coming up there and saying that to him. And he went to Bruce Pritchard and said, I never said that.
Well, and I don't know if this is true. This is what I've heard. This is what great guy Bart is. When he had to fight Bob Holly, who's a good friend of them, they came to agreement that,
he did.
He said, hey, well, I'm not going to wrestle you. We'll just box. That's what Bob wanted to do. And he could have knocked Bob out.
Yeah.
He did.
Yeah. Yeah. We talked about that as well. Were you were there when were you there when they were doing the Brawl for All?
No.
Oh, you weren't there? What did you think just when you heard about it, that they were going to have all these, shoot matches out there?
Well, there was two things I thought about. One would be this. Are they going to believe it? Because we, at this point in time, wrestling, our fans, we tell them it's a work, but they don't want to hear it.
Right.
They want to think it's real. But on the other side, if we tell them it's real, then they're going to tell us it's fake.
Right.
So I just didn't think that was something they needed to do to, one, jeopardize a lot of people who got really hurt on those things. Like Papa Sean got hurt.
Steve Williams was
finished.
Yeah.
And Steve Williams, in my opinion, at one time, I thought he could be a big money drawer, especially as a heel. So I think that was silly. I don't think it was good for the business. They didn't achieve what they were going for. And then Bart got knocked out by Butterbean. Yeah. So that hurt the business. Now they brought, someone real and beat up their toughest guy in their territory.
Yeah.
So that couldn't have been good.
Yeah. Thoughts on the series of matches you had with Jeff Jarrett, who I'm sure you were very familiar with from your days in Memphis.
Right. Jeff is a good worker. This is funny about some people you work with, and of course you watch them on TV and they look really fluid and everything looks in place and everything looks easy. Jeff wasn't that easy to work with. I mean, he was easy to whatever you wanted to do. He was good about that, but I just didn't like his spots he came up with. I usually worked with him. He was the heel, so as he's the heel, I let him call the match.
Okay,
for the most part, and so this like picking him up for a slam, it was like Velcros to me. It just wasn't that smooth.
Wow,
but he was a hard worker.
Yeah. Thoughts on matches, like Sting, a guy you've wrestled a lot in your career, Lex Luger.
Lex, of course I said again, Sting probably one of the greatest people I've worked with. Lex was okay to work with, but he was so robotic. In our earlier days when we first worked together, it was a lot more fun. He was over, I was a heel, and that made it fun. But, that last run in WCW, I worked there with him just a handful of times. He was one of those that just wanted to call it in and get out. Him and Mr. to get back to whatever they want to do.
Yeah, because I remember watching the matches, and I remember seeing the matches in '89, and you guys had a lot of fire and everything together, and it was a lot different this time around.
It really was.
Thoughts on, you did some tag matches with Vampiro.
Mm-hmm. I felt this guy was smooth.
Mm-hmm.
I really did. I liked his character. I liked the idea. I thought he did everything they asked. I think, only thing that might have happened is whoever it was Russo, whoever, they put him in a big spot, trying to put him over Flair, put him over Sting, which I think that should have and could have happened because they could have come back. Sting could have come back and beat him down the road.
Sure.
I just think things like that make, especially good, especially when you got someone Sting's been there for 100 years. Vampiro got a really good look, he works hard and was good, credible. I don't think he got the break he should have got.
Do you find that a lot, that there are a lot of guys, again, this goes back to looking long term as compared to looking short term, that there are some guys that just don't want to do a job for whatever reason, but they're not looking ahead to long term and saying, hey, we can make a lot of money on the rematches.
Yeah, I'll give you a good example of this. I remember one time, it was yesterday, Ole Anderson was the booker. Me and Mick Foley were working the territory at WCW. Ole was a tough, hard-nosed guy, and when he wasn't being hard-nosed or cussing me, I didn't think he liked me.
Mm-hmm.
But he was cussing me, I knew he liked me. For whatever reason, Mick thought he had a hard-on for him or had something against him. And I remember the night Mick walked out, I remember walking outside with him saying, Mick, don't do this. This isn't worth it, man. You got a job here, and blah, 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 blah. But for him, I think that's childish too, that we're that much about what happens in a wrestling ring when you're getting paid such good money. And maybe at that time he hadn't realized it, but whatever happened today is forgotten.
Yeah.
For the most part. And I know that better than anyone.
Yeah.
I've done more jobs. Like I said, I volunteered to do more jobs. And then I walked out the very next night, I was still over like son of a gun. So I just think that that's overrated. People, but that's you get 10 people together. We got hundreds, we got thousands of people in this industry. So if you just got 10 people, one or two of those people aren't going to go along with the program.
Yeah, yeah. How strange was it when Bischoff came back and now you had Bischoff and Russo working together?
I didn't really find it too strange. I didn't, because again, I don't waste my time worried about things like that.
Yeah.
I was glad Eric was back, because I thought and still think Eric is one of the better minds in this business for making things really spectacular. Maybe not a person spectacular, but he was good at that too. But he really made events happen. He did at WCW some really cool stuff.
Yeah, yeah. You finally had the series of matches with Goldberg, and again, this goes back to '97 when we did our first shoot. What are your thoughts looking back on the series of matches that you had with them?
They were good. I just wish I would have thought of maybe a little more about the match that night before I went into a couple of them, especially the pay-per-views. But he was easy to work with because he was so over, and that always makes it a lot more fun.
Yeah.
Other than it's just his inexperience was the only downside.
Did he was he untrustworthy? If you wanted to do something, was he, because like you said before, he had so many people that did him wrong?
No, not with me. He wasn't. He really wasn't. We both had a really good rapport and a good trust with each other. We knew each other before he ever got into the wrestling business. I was working at WCW. He was playing for the Atlanta Falcons. We saw each other in the gym, and we saw each other out a lot, and we're really good friends. The thing about Bill, I don't know if people say this enough, he's got a heart of gold. He's one of the greatest people you've ever met, one of the nicest people he's ever met, and especially being thrown into a spot like that. He really never lost his head very much, as far as like always was real respectable to the wrestling fans and all the boys and stuff like that. There was a few people he didn't like. Scott Hall was one of them. Kevin Nash was one. He felt like they had it out for him.
Now, working in the WWE and working for Vince and knowing what you do about Goldberg, why do you think that things didn't really work out for him over there as an outsider looking in?
You know, one, I think, you know, that big change, you know, when Vince bought out the companies and the people knew what was going on. Bill was already on a downhill skid in WCW.
Mm-hmm.
He wasn't the big money drawer that they really hoped him to be, because if he was, he would have been drawing money.
Yeah.
That's just being honest. Brought into WWE, I said this too. I said he wouldn't last very long. Especially with his personality. He's got a good personality, but he takes things to heart really too much. And I think that probably was I'm not for sure because I wasn't there, but I think that was more probably the downfall, whatever you want to say, that caused things not to work out more than anything. I didn't watch enough of it to see if they were using him to his ability.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Vince is always pretty smart about what people's strongholds are, what their negatives are, not, you know, staying away from the negative. And it's real easy for Bill to done that. I don't know too if maybe Bill might have came in and said something to Vince like, "Hey, this is what I need to do to get over." And Vince going to go, "Okay, we're going to show you now what you don't tell us." Unfortunately, you know, Vince educated me like, "Okay, Sid, why do you like this person? He talks so bad about you." I'm just making up a story. Well, Sid, the reason why is because I got so much money invested in this guy. I'm going to use him just like I use you. He's real honest about that. I'm going to get you over, and I'm going to bleed you for everything I can bleed you for. That's the business. But then, you know, I also seen some vindictive things, what I call vindictive booking.
Yeah.
Where it just, you know, booking and doing things to a guy out there that just does it is not helping the company. And it could have got to that point. I don't know that part.
Well, you said in the last shoot interview you thought it was a little vindictive when you came back and they started calling you Sycho Sid.
Well, I think that was a little vindictive. I think too that they just used that for, you know, they were really down. I'm telling you, man, that territory was on its butt.
Wow.
People weren't getting paid.
Wow.
I mean, really, the guys, except for myself, I was getting paid. But like Billy and Bart and Bob and all these guys, they had to go on the road, collect their draw money, and that's how they survived. Because, you know, I think WWE, you get paid weekly, and sometimes be a month where you got paid. So that was, that's how bad it was going in there. So I think they were doing it for shock value. They, you know, Vince was honest with me in the beginning. He said, "Hey, this is what we want to do. We're trying to get Kevin Nash over. So we're going to bring you in, have you work against him, and then maybe Shawn after that." The thing about it was this, though. From the very first show I showed up, which I think was WrestleMania at Hartford.
Okay.
They chanted my name the whole time. And every time I worked with Kevin, and almost on every venue, I was the babyface or the one, you know, the more popular one or whatever. To me, you're working against the grain there. When you're forcing something down someone's throat, like they did with Rock the first time, they didn't buy it. But then after he got over a little bit and let the people, you know, absorb him, it helped. I think that would help Kevin too. I don't think he'd ever would have achieved the status the Rock achieved because different personalities and different charisma.
Sure. And is it true in the one match you had with Goldberg where you bled a lot? Is it true that you had a surgeon cut your head?
Yep, they came in early, numbed me, cut me. We did a little deal in the back where Goldberg would hit me. You know, they showed that. That was like a little insert in the pay-per-view. And then went back, sewed it up, and then went back to the ring. And then it didn't open up quite as much as they wanted to at first, and then they got me a couple more times. The referee did. I've never done that myself.
Yeah.
And so then it did open up. And I never saw it, but I know I called home that night, man. My family were in tears.
Wow.
You know, so it must have really been pretty scary looking.
Wow. And you teamed up a little bit with Hogan in WCW. You know, what's that?
And Bill.
Yeah, and Bill. What were your thoughts on working with them as teammates?
It was a lot of fun.
Was it?
It was.
All right. And you left for a little while with an injury. I think it was a tournament match I had with Sting. It was the last match you had for a while, and then you came back kind of early. Did you feel pressure to?
Well, I was. You know, I had. This is the whole weird story about that. I wasn't even set up, and I was set up to go back to Dr. Andrews on Christmas Day for my referral. they called me like a month prior. Hey, Terry Taylor, man, we know you're not ready. The doctors haven't given you the deal, but we need you. I couldn't get my wallet out of my back pocket.
Wow. I
couldn't put a belt on, but I didn't want them to know that. I couldn't carry my wrestling bag. So I said, well, man, he said, well, if you'll just go to a doctor and tell them you're just going to try this on a trial night-to-night deal. So that's what I did. And then they brought me back several times also just to supposedly just do some stand-in things. Mm-hmm. Like one time was in Biloxi, Mississippi, and that was just a stand-in thing. But I found out Hogan was coming in to clothesline me over the top rope. I landed right on my shoulder. I just had surgery on. That set me back too. And I thought, and then I was working so hard through therapy and working out in the gym so hard to try to maintain my look. Dr. Andrew said it was a normal, time frame. It's just all the stress I was keeping on that particular area.
Yeah, yeah. Now you had a series of back to the shoulder. How did it consistently nag you because you never really had time to let it heal? Did it consistently nag you along the way? Or?
Well, it did, and that's up to even the night I broke my leg. I couldn't do a suplex or anything like that. I couldn't move my arm. I couldn't raise my arm above my head. Like I said, I couldn't put my wallet in.
Wow.
So, but they knew that. But I was trying to be a team player. That's what I don't understand about people saying that I'm not a team player. Yeah. And I've walked in so sick, so hurt, where I couldn't even carry my own bag and still worked, so, but, that's this.
Yeah.
2020.
Yeah. You had a series of matches with Scott Steiner, who had changed a lot since the first time you were around the territory. What do you remember about those matches?
Chaos.
Yeah.
He was so, man, I don't know what his problem was. He was just so, I don't know. He just couldn't calm down. He was just, cussing everybody, screaming at everybody, the referees, the people in the back, just, I don't know if it was, his first really solo stardom deal. I don't know if you know this or not. He would they'd say go out and do an interview about Sting, and then halfway through it, he's cussing Hogan. It's like, what's going on here? Everybody look at each other and go. And I don't know what was his problem in the WWE, why he didn't last there, but I knew he wasn't going to last there either because you're not going to talk to people like that there for very long.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Was he, when you actually got in the ring with him, did he calm down or was he still,
He was just erratic, man. Just nervous as I don't know what. I think the pressure was too much for him.
Wow.
Of course, I don't know if you, I'm not saying anything anyone doesn't know. I remember in Gainesville, I think it was Gainesville, when they first gave him his first singles match against Ric Flair, he bombed terribly.
Oh, back in the day.
Yeah,
okay,
remember about that?
Absolutely.
Okay, he never shook that. And that's why I still say that Rick was the better of the two. Rick had all the tools, in my opinion, to have been anything he could have wanted to be. He could have been the next Steve Austin because he had credibility, he had physical gifts. He could do the, those awkward things like the thing off the top. All those things that a lot of people couldn't do, and he had that word credibility. I think he was the better of the two.
Well, let me ask you thoughts on this, because you've talked about Rick and Scott and everything. And I don't know if you know this, you might, but it's been documented by everybody involved that Rick Steiner was actually supposed to go over on Ric Flair at Starrcade 88 in under 5 minutes for the world title in somewhat of a squash. It was Dusty booking at the time, and Flair went above Dusty to Turner or Crockett and got it changed.
Well, he did that to me too.
Really?
I was supposed to have won the belt that night in Chicago at Halloween Havoc against Sting.
Right.
And that was probably my greatest night of wrestling, and I didn't even know the finish. What we were told is I was going to win, and how it was going to happen was we're going to do a match, go to the finish, throw him outside the ring, throw him through the back door, and as he's come back through, he's going to work his deal that someone hit him in the head, walk into the ring, roll him up, 1, 2, 3, I'm the champ, okay? I've been told this now for 3 months. I did interviews for 3 months. I was going to be the next champ. Ric Flair would come to me and say, he said, you shouldn't be saying that. That's what Ole says I'm going to be. So I'm going to say what Ole tells me to say. And so I know that he was the one that went to the upper people and said, Sid's not ready for this. So what they did was They had Barry Windham come in, rolled him up, 1, 2, 3. I got the belt, never was told anything different. I think, okay, I'm the champ, have my back turned. This huge eruption comes, turn around, Sting's in the ring, refs grabbing the belt out of my hand, going, take the Stinger splash, 1, 2, 3. I didn't even know that was part of the thing. You know,
wow.
But to me, I get chill bumps talking about that. That to me is more fun than have everything laid out. And we fooled everybody. We fooled the boys. And when you fool the boys, and that's what I learned that night, and I do it in some of my matches sometimes, I try to be really physical and really make everybody think I really hate that person while I'm out there, because I know if you fool the boys, you fool the people. That simple.
Wow. So, just to close out on the Rick Steiner deal, if Rick would have went over as planned, do you think he would have wound up becoming that big star that you think he could have been?
I think he could have been. If, for instance, if he had the right people in his ear saying, okay, Rick, to be the champ and to be the top single guy, you got to give. And that's, I got in his ear like that a little bit at the end there. Yeah. And I let him know then that, man, the only reason you haven't gotten to where you should be is because people are scared of you,
Wow. Now, I don't know, because I know you talked about it before, that you had a match scheduled with Hogan on the pay-per-view and that was changed to Jarrett. Was that the match that they had their deal where he... Do you think that was just a big let's work the boys thing, or do you think that was legit?
I think it was legit. I know Russo hated Hogan for whatever reason. There was just, it's got to be frustrating for anyone who's coming into a place and trying to do good and make big change when your top player doesn't do anything but what he wants to do. You can't make change in a territory if your top players aren't playing with you. So I know that had to be frustrating for him. And then I don't think Hogan trusted anybody. He had that, what it was called.
Creative control.
Creative control. I don't think that should be given to anyone. I just don't. I don't want that. Even if it was offered to me, I don't want that responsibility to say, okay, well, we didn't succeed because you didn't do what we asked.
Yeah.
That's not. I don't want that blame.
How was why do you think the match was changed from you to Jeff?
I don't know why, because we shot the angle and in Miami, I believe it was, and did TVs the next day, I think, in Tampa. Everything was still going as good, and then they brought me into the room and said, hey, the shoulder's a little hurt, we're going to give you this pay-per-view off, we're going to do this, have Jarrett come in. I don't really know the real reason for it, other than we know that Jeff Jarrett was Russo's, confidant,
right,
or best buddy, or whatever you want to call it.
His boy.
His boy.
Yeah.
And I think that's another indication, another telltale sign about Vince Russo is really not that great business oriented, because that was a bad decision. You don't make decisions. It's like betting on a football game or a basketball game. I don't bet on my fate who I like. I bet who I think is going to win.
Right. At what point, or at any point, did you think to yourself in WCW from a business standpoint that things are just spinning out of control around here?
Well, I sort of felt like that from the very first time I worked for him. There wasn't any structure there. And after working for Vince and seeing structure and seeing how things are done perfect, that was something I tried to do when I went back to him. I worked in the office with Ole just doing things like this, interviews, being sure people got some things done right, and if it wasn't good, I didn't know. Just the formula for this business is so simple, and Vince used to have it down, really down to an art. And when you saw how simple it was and how successful it could be, you wanted to send that formula everywhere you went. I remember me and the Nasty Boys, we were back in WCW. They had also left, and I had left. We were in somewhere in South Carolina in front of $20,000 house. I wanted to commit suicide. I thought, man, I just left 70,000 people, man, and I'm in front of 2,000. And they were like, man, isn't it great? The house is up $4,000. I looked at Brian Knobs. I said, shut up. Don't even include me in this. I don't want anybody to say I was a part of this. That's how, but again, like I said, it was more fun atmosphere, more of a family type of deal. But that's not what I was looking for.
Yeah. When you heard that WCW was up for sale, were you surprised?
No, that rumor had sort of been buzzing around there for a while. I was a little shocked that it went through. Especially I was really shocked that Vince was the one that bought it. because I couldn't believe Turner would give in like that. Of course, he had so many people over him making that decision for him, I believe.
Yeah.
It was just, I think the whole thing was strange. And I'll tell you what I think. This is my opinion. I think that was the opportunity for the business to start back from square one. We could have done everything. I mean, I know this sounds maybe silly, but you could have went back for it. You could have really got someone like me, had really strong credibility, and beat somebody with a slam. Don't touch the referees for a while. Don't get out of the ring for a while. That's what I want to do when I go back. I want to never ever wrestle outside of the ring. Be the first person to do that. And have it. And then they'll know things like that.
Yeah.
I think they screwed up that opportunity. They didn't do some of the things right. You
mean when they integrated WCW?
Yeah. I think when they all started that, it was a good time for them to start back a little bit, take a few steps back, go back to some of the simple philosophies of the business, and then do some of the, because they're still doing the same things they did 100 years ago, right? Just a little different twist, and sometimes the twists aren't different. So this would have been a good idea to start back then. Say, I'm just using a slam for a finish. I'm just using that for an example. Okay, then that would have made a power bomb really spectacular.
Yeah.
Well,
you watch even the old tapes today and you see guys beating people on vertical suplex. It was, once they hit that, it's over.
Exactly. So that's the only thing is I think that was a mistake. I think they could have went back. They could have gave the business a rebirth. I believe.
Yeah. Now, because a lot of guys at WCW were making a lot of money at the time. Did any of the boys ever think, well, let's just pool our money together and buy WCW?
I don't think, no. I think it was way too much money for people to do that. And two, like me, from my experience in this business, you don't put any money back into the business and you lose it.
Gotcha.
Even if you try to run your own show. Hogan's a good example. He tried to run that show, him and they're in Memphis, and they lost their ass.
Yeah.
None of them could have made no money.
I think now looking back on it, I think Randy Savage did actually put a bid in on his own for WCW.
I think you're right.
But nothing really worked out. Because I think it only sold for like $3 million or something like that. That was
cheap, yeah. So I think they should have, but the thing is, though, and you do know this, but probably weren't thinking about it takes a lot more money than that week to week, with payroll and production costs, and now Turner's not backing you. You got to come up with your own Jumbotron, your own rings. It's been too tough.
Yeah.
And the business was bad then too.
And I guess for somebody like Vince, he already has the rings, the production, everything. You had some matches in WCW with Shane Douglas, who was he in Continental when you were there?
Yes,
I think he was.
Actually, a lot of people remember this. He was, I was a heel, Lord Humongous. He came out, he's the one who turned me babyface. He was my cousin. Right.
Because I used to watch on the Financial News Network. It was on FNN back in the day.
Yeah. Shane was a lot of fun to work with. I didn't really respect him so much as a worker until I worked with him in WCW.
Really?
I didn't thought he was that great. But he really made me look like $1 million the time I worked with him. And he was smooth and just really giving,
Wow.
Shane's got a little bit, if you know him. He's a little cocky or a little different. I don't know what the right word is for him, but one of those people I would say believes too much in his character.
He's very confident in himself.
Yeah, confident in himself too. We all have to be that. But the franchise and but he knew Sting was using that. That's something you don't need to do. He's not a franchise. But that's still. But he was a lot of fun to work with.
Yeah. Now, one of the match where you broke your leg. You weren't known for coming off the ropes. How does that all come about?
Well, Johnny had been asking me to do that stupid
John
stuff.
Laurinaitis, Johnny Ace?
For some time. And they knew I couldn't even put my belt on. So I said, I don't feel comfortable even jumping off a rope right now to give an axe handle. And I just don't want to do it. So the night of the pay-per-view in Indianapolis, he had it written into the script. And why it was so important, because once I did that, then they were going to pan back to the mystery partner, who we know wasn't going to be on my side. We knew the finish was his brother. And then as they come back, I think at that point they were supposed to have me down, getting their heat on me. He was to showed up, and then not save the day or whatever the case was. I just, I could have, only thing I could say is I could have, and I even at one point that evening said, hey man, I want you to change this. I don't want to do it. And, for several years, man, it was a big regret for me. I'm telling you something. You're talking about 6 fucking years of rehab to get where I'm at today. It never a day of it didn't go back to me. I think about that.
Wow.
A little animosity, not towards Johnny, really to myself. Nothing against Johnny. Johnny's not a genius either. He's got a good mind for the business. But me jumping off, giving Scott Steiner a knee to the head is not going to fucking, use my language, not do anything other than get me hurt. And that wasn't going to make that big of a deal. That's what really bothered me about the whole thing.
When you originally hurt your leg, did you think, just like all the other injuries, you could recover from it in 6 months or something?
Oh yeah, now when I was in the hospital that night, I never saw it. I never looked at it. Never seen the clip. Never want to. Those doctors looked at me, and I could tell by their eyes something was wrong. Even when I went home and started doing my referral work, I didn't really know more about this injury until, really, believe it or not, that horse Barbaro.
Yes.
All right. What happens is when you have a compound fracture that far away, there's no muscle tissue. So it's the hardest way for anything to rehab. And that's why it was so hard, and that's why it's been such a long process. And I was never predicted ever to walk or run again.
Wow.
I'm doing all that now. So that's why I'm a little biting at the bit now, because now I'm ready, and I'm ready to get back, and I want to finish my career not being carted out on a stretcher. And always wanted to finish my career working in the WWE. That's where I could have the most fun and most, not so much the most fun, but the most, I could really be.
You make the biggest impact.
Well, then I could get my self-gratification by drawing money, and that's, I know it sounds cliche, but that's my most important thing for me. If I'm drawing money, I'm making money. Right. Making money, not drawing money is not that much fun. I've done it, worked for WCW. You just go through the motions, but when you're drawing money, you're working hard and it's just, you don't feel aches and pains, it's so well worth it.
Yeah. As far as the clip, people compare it to Joe Theismann when Joe Theismann broke his leg, and it's just, it's an infamous clip. People, watch it to this day.
Well, I believe too that just between you and me, that just coming back from that's going to be the biggest medical comeback in the history of any sport. Just for me to come back from that alone, not saying changing my identity, that might help too, but coming back from that is going to make, that'll be a hell of a deal.
Definitely. People love comebacks.
Exactly. And man, this has got a heck of a story, man. You got to realize, 1 month after that surgery, I was in the gym on a walker, doing power cleans on one leg. I got people at the gym that still remind me, how was you doing that? Walking downstairs on a walker, only allowed to put 7 pounds of pressure on this leg. So I did that, and then, running into that wall every day, it was tough. Yeah. Now I've ran through that wall, so that's been really upside for me.
I was going to ask you, mentally, how at your lowest point, recovering from leg injury, how down did you get?
Man, I'm going to tell you something. I had to, it really put a strain on everything in my life. Because at first I was hitting the wall, but it wasn't affecting me. I said, okay, I don't know what I'm doing. The doctors weren't really giving me a lot of telling me what was going on either. Finally had one doctor finally tell me, he said, you're not going to really ever walk again. Man, from that point on, it was pretty scary. So I had to work harder and harder. I'd work out in the morning, then I'd go to rehab for 3.5 to 4 hours a day. Every day for years I did this. So depression, I never dealt with depression before. I had to deal with that. I didn't even know I was dealing with depression. I never, I don't have anything to be depressed about. It's one of those things that sneak up on you. You don't even realize it's hitting you until it's too late. It caused me a lot of problems with my family. I'm just now able to make up to my family the way I was acting. And I didn't even know why I was acting like that. had to go through a anger management course because I was so angry at the whole world. Wasn't blaming anybody for anything, but boy, I was just and I use anger as a tool for me too to succeed. Sometimes, like if whatever's going on, I'm gonna work. I'm so damn mad. I'm gonna work out 3 times today. I'm gonna run bleachers twice. So that would push me and making me do better. This time, anger didn't work for me. It just made a hole deeper and deeper.
That's exactly what you said in the last interview, was how anger motivated you to run more bleachers, and because you were recovering from injury, when we did our last interview and things like that. Right. And you were saying the same exact thing.
Well, and it does. And I was running, I got a hill over Memphis. It's 110 yards up, a pretty steep angle. I run up to the top of it, I spit, and I step on it because I'm stepping on somebody. That's what I think in my mind.
That's what you said the last time.
And that's what makes me get up that hill another time. Man, I can run bleachers for 60 minutes nonstop. It's just, I'm in such shape. It's phenomenal.
Wow.
And people see that too. And then people, you realize back home, it takes anywhere from 3 to 4 people to work out with me in a week because they can't recover and they can't, work out with intensity. I mean, I don't believe what's called an empty set. Every set's a failure.
Wow.
It's so intense, and that's why I'm in such great shape. Even with the disability I had to work through.
Yeah.
And now it's no longer a disability. It's actually been it's been a good thing for me.
Is it harder to stay in such top shape as you get older?
You know what? I would have thought so. I'm in better shape now than I was before I broke my leg.
Wow.
And that's what's so weird. And this is the time that I judge myself. I have 2 goals. One's long-term, one's short-term. The long-term goal is to see how many pounds of lean muscle mass I can put on in each year. And this is the time that I lean down. That's why I'm a little lean right now. From 305 to around 280 now. I was down to 270, but I'm coming back up a little bit. I see how many pounds of lean muscle mass I can put on in 1 year. Then my short-term goal is to see how many days consecutively I can make it into the gym without missing. Like through November, December, January, I didn't miss a day.
Wow.
The gym opened up for me on the days off.
Wow.
So people don't know that about me either. I'm at my first workout at 5 o'clock, and then I'm back in there at 1 or whatever, and I'm in there for 3 hours at minimum.
Wow.
Each time.
Now, when you were recovering from your injury and you were at your lowest point, did you cut off contact, like not even talk to any of your friends anymore or guys from the business?
I changed my phone number.
Wow.
I didn't want to ask that story. I didn't want to answer that story. I didn't want to answer any more questions about that anymore. On the other hand, there have been so many good people that strangers. Like for instance, when I was going to the gym, I knew, for instance, I could walk. I could get out of my vehicle and I could walk so many steps before I had to sit down. There were people that were personally parking my vehicle for me, opening the doors for me, things like that. Hey, we're praying for you. Those were good things, or good parts of my life that kept me going.
Yeah.
The wrestling business side has a tendency to ask the same old nagging questions. If you're talking to one of the boys, especially, they're going to how did that leg, how did it happen, why did it happen, and just explaining it time and time again for it seems like even today I'm still answering it. But for 3 4 years, man, it was all day, every day.
Yeah.
I just got tired.
And it makes a lot of sense what you say about wanting that last run to show people you don't want to go out like that, because there are a lot of people, kids that have never seen you wrestle before, but then they find your clip on YouTube or something like that.
That, and for me, I take a lot of pride in what I've done. I really maybe think too much of myself. Some people, we all think, maybe say things that make it sound like that. I think I had a really great career. I think that would be a horrible way to be remembered going out. And now I have so much more to offer. More mature. Those last few years in WCW, no one could have been more giving than I was. This whole idea about this thing now, this is why this can only be a win-win situation for Vince and myself. I'm coming in knowing what my job is, and that's to get over and draw money, and then after that, put people over. And not many people want to, in their career correctly.
Yeah.
By saying, okay, use me, put me on that slab, cut my head off, I'm finished, I'll do after that what you want me to do.
Well, look at Hogan. He doesn't want to go back because he doesn't want to finish that way.
That's silly. That's silly because, to do that, it doesn't mean you can't come back. To do a job doesn't mean you don't come back.
Yeah.
Unless you say, "Hey, I don't want to come back."
Right.
I know this is just what I feel like they wanted to do with Hogan when I was in there the first time. They were ready for Hogan to finish up and only do special appearances through the year.
This was 15 years ago.
Right. He didn't want to do that then. So some of us had that deal where we don't want to, but at the time too, Vince and them didn't want him to go to WCW, but they wanted to keep him here to do just, special deals. Hogan was looking at a larger picture. Can't fault the guy for doing it, but he's back now for Vince doing periodically shots, and I don't know this to be true or not. I heard this while he was in Memphis. This is why they wouldn't let Lawler and anybody else do the show, because he wouldn't do WrestleMania. I don't know the truth to that.
That's what they say, yeah.
Yeah.
That's the word on the street.
And I don't know why he didn't want to do WrestleMania.
Money? Something to do with money?
Well, I heard they offered him a lot of money. It wasn't the money I heard. I heard it was the position on the card.
Okay.
You know?
I think he had some kind of deal where when he came back for shows, he had to be the highest paid guy on the show, and for a while it worked, and Vince doesn't want that anymore, but he still wants to be the highest paid guy on the show even at this stage of the game.
The only thing I say about that is this: if you're drawing the money, you should be the highest paid guy on the show.
Yeah.
And when he came back, I think he was still drawing bigger crowds than anybody else. So, I don't know why that would have been an issue, but I guess it was.
Yeah. Was it mentally the first time you stepped back in a wrestling ring after you, recovered and after all those years and the hard work? Was it a tough mental block to get over, stepping back into the wrestling ring and being in a position where your leg's vulnerable again?
Well, that's funny. My first show back actually was a referee gig in Montreal for Jock and Carl Willett.
Okay.
Which I did feel awkward on that one. The next gig was I came to Montreal and did a pay-per-view for a company. It was like ECW in Montreal. I can't remember the name.
IWS, maybe?
IWS, something like that.
Yeah.
I worked a whole hour that night. We were in a tag team type of tournament that really wasn't a tournament, but we did this whole deal. I did a little bit of this gig that I want to do for Vince and them about this guy character that I've been talking about. And I used a midget. I used a cast of characters. Where I'm getting this theme from is from great conquerors in the world like Genghis Khan.
Okay.
And what they did after they conquered countries, they'd go into the castle and they would parade the queen, the king around and have a party. Then when they got tired of that, they would cut their heads off. And I would say that in the interview. I'd go, hey, and gods took me to that. And I was sitting right next to Genghis Khan when this happened. But I worked that whole hour. Now, I'd set up all these things up with Carl. Carl being from Montreal. He just said, I just don't understand all this stuff. We had an hourglass, and everybody had all these props, and I had the midget and the girls and blah, 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 blah. But when we got done with it, we got home that night, and we were exhausted. And Carl looked at me, and Carl, I have a great amount of respect for this guy. He's a great worker. He looked at me and he said, Sid, you're a genius. I mean, I do know what I'm doing. I know what works. I know how to make things work. And they don't always sound just like the deal with Flair. That chair didn't sound like that big of a deal, but it was.
Mm-hmm.
So these little things that were complex, for Carl, was so much to digest in a couple of days of going over it, which really just needs years to be done. And we did it in one night.
Yeah.
But it was a lot of fun. And that, to get back to your answer on that, but I did that whole hour and never thought about my leg.
Wow.
Not one time. But then the next match after I had like that was a year after that, was in Nashville. I did a few matches there. Same thing. I just man. Of course, I'm running at this point, so I wouldn't have any problems.
Yeah. How did you find out that the sale was done and that Vince bought WCW?
Someone called and told me about it and said, "Watch it tonight. Shane's going to come on and announce it."
Yeah.
I saw it like that.
Yeah. Now, how did it affect you? Because I would imagine you were under contract.
I was still under contract. They were, until my contract was up, WCW paid me just like they paid everyone else.
Did Vince ever try and buy out early or anything like that? Or?
No, well, I'm crippled at that point. There's probably no sense in it. I mean, I know I couldn't have helped anybody at that point.
Yeah. Did anybody ask you to come to the last Nitro, or did they know since you were hurt you couldn't?
I couldn't even travel.
Yeah. Wow. And, after when Vince started integrating WCW into his storylines and his television, did anybody try and contact you, or did they know how severely injured you were?
Vince never contacted me. This is funny. When Jeff Jarrett first started TNA up, he had no one's name to put up there to show the sponsors that that they had. He called me and asked me, and I gave him a letter of recommendation or whatever you call it, saying I was working for the company, which I was on a walker. That was the only person that asked me to do that. That's what's strange too, is all the things I did to help those guys, because they called and asked me to come in and do some things, but I was honest with them. I don't want to work for those guys unless I could know I'm not going to work for Vince. Right. Because I wouldn't do something small. Right.
I don't know how much you watched or anything, but did you watch the way that WCW was integrated into WWE TV at all?
Not much of it.
No. I was wondering, what you thought about. You would think that something like that would be an angle you could run with for. They could still be running with it.
Well, that's what I was saying earlier.
Yeah.
I think that's where the spot that they could have started up from scratch.
Yeah.
And said, okay, and made this into a big feud. First of all, I wouldn't have made a big deal about the sale. Vince was too, and I saw Vince come out, he was too happy to get out there and talk bad about Ted Turner. It was over after that interview. They knew Vince had won. I wouldn't have done that. I would have, worked it as hey, I would have never said anything. I'd let the people thought what they wanted to think about it. I would try to keep the sale quiet even and let the two companies run, in existence by themselves. Then all of a sudden make the two, like nations collide. They never did do that.
Yeah.
Properly.
If you're Vince and you just bought it, why would you go out trashing something you own now?
It doesn't make sense, and it doesn't make that's not to me Vince's philosophy. I think that might have been some vindictive booking.
Yeah. Do you think if Eric Bischoff would have bought WCW like he was talking about doing, you would have been a big part of that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Eric was always good to me.
Yeah. Did you? I don't know if you were hurt yet. Were you there when it was announced? I think it was announced to the boys anyway that Bischoff bought it, and then obviously it didn't go through.
Yes, I was there then.
Oh, okay.
Bischoff and supposedly the people that do the ESPN Classics were doing a joint venture.
Yeah. And they what did they do? They came in and they said that he's going to buy it and everything.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, they were there the night I broke my leg.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they were.
Wow. You talked about signing the letter of intent with Jarrett and everything. And are you surprised that they didn't try and at least get you involved in some way? I know you said you didn't want to.
Well, this is what I offered to them. I told them what I thought my time schedule was as far as I could do anything physical. Mm-hmm. I said, but I have a great passion also to be a booker or a creator. I don't know if you know this. I brought in Harlem Heat. I gave them their name.
Okay.
And when I was there in the beginning, I had a really cool gimmick for him with Robert Parker.
Okay, I remember.
I started him.
Okay.
I gave him that gimmick, bought that suit for him.
Did you?
Gave him his name, wrote all his interviews, did everything. But I learned all this previously working for Vince. I learned these tools with Harlem Heat and them. I had a really cool idea for them because they really scarred a little bit. And at the time, Louisiana governor was a really big gambler. And I said, Colonel Parker being the flamboyant person he is, he had won a gambling debt and the governor of Louisiana owed him so much money he just couldn't pay it. So he said, hey, I want to tell you what I do. I want to take two people off death row and I'm going to make them into world champions. Because I'm the greatest promoter of all time, Colonel Parker being
Elvis's
exactly.
Parker, right?
So he first introduced me as my coming in, as coming back. But I said, hey, for your interview, you say this was too easy. I am the Elvis of wrestling. So you're going to take two people who are just, have nothing going for them in their life. So you're going to make them into Elvises.
Yeah.
And so I met Harlem Heat doing a benefit for Kerry Von Erich. And that's when I said, I'm going to bring these guys in. It took me forever to get those guys to come in. Dusty didn't want them. Nobody wanted them. But when I got them there, it was like the greatest thing that ever happened.
Yeah.
But that's what I sort of wanted to do for TNA. I could do, I wanted to book. I knew they didn't have any great bookers, or any better than me. I could have had a chance there, but that's why I really disappointed them because they never offered that to me.
Yeah. Have you ever talked to anybody that wanted to start their own company and use you in an office position like that?
Well, almost all these little people that have across the country, had ideas about trying to start up their territory. They usually call me and ask me if I would be interested in doing that, and I say yeah, but then they never start up.
How come, were you contacted to go over to Australia, the WWA thing, the Andrew McManus thing? And why didn't that work out?
I did go.
Oh, you did go?
Yeah.
Oh, what do you remember about that? How come that didn't work out?
You know what? No, all right. It's sort of ironic. I was over in Australia doing a promotional thing for WCW's first thing over there. At the time, Andrew McManus was there doing a show with Kurt Hennig versus Dennis Rodman.
Right.
And they weren't doing too bad. They were doing pretty good. All right. And then I was introduced to Andrew, or he got in touch with me over the phone. No, I had to go. I was on a wheelchair going over there, man.
Wow.
So I was there. I flew over there, did the show, and came right back.
Huh.
That's how quick it was.
Wow. Wow. Do you think they could have did anything if you got TV or anything?
I think they could have. I thought Andrew McManus, have, and especially have met, all the top people of both territories. I think he could have done pretty good.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
And I think he had the money. It showed he had the money. It just, if he could just, had a good team, say, of minds behind him, because he couldn't have done it by himself.
Yeah. Do you think, because you worked for him in the past, Jarrett, I know he was in the running too to buy WCW. If he would have bought WCW and had that, do you think he would have been successful, or do you think he still would have had that territorial mentality about him?
I'm going to have to say that I think he had that territorial mentality about him. And while we would say that, you look at their show today, first of all, it's Jeff. Now he's a babyface. That's almost, that's like death for that territory, in my opinion. For you take, for instance, say if I came in there, one of the most credible heels in the business, and then I put him over, you don't have nowhere to go, and he's not going to draw any money by himself.
Right.
I just don't think that, I just don't think they can get away from that.
Yeah. Yeah. There was a story that I read somewhere on one of those urban legends things that back when you were in your younger days, they used to bring a squirrel on the road with you. Is that true?
No, it's not.
That's not true. Do you know the story I'm talking about?
No, I don't. Go ahead. But I had somebody ask me about the squirrel. I don't really know what the whole deal is about.
There was a story. Somebody said in an interview that you used to travel with a pet squirrel, and the boys bet you to stick it down your pants, and you got bit by a squirrel and had to go get a tetanus shot.
No. I haven't even been squirrel hunting in 20 years.
No.
Actually, I got a dog right now. I'm training to be a squirrel dog.
Okay.
But just for the sport, not for the kill.
Yeah. Are you surprised that a guy that you worked a lot with in your time in the WWE, Undertaker, are you surprised at his age and his size that he's able to still go at a really high level, too?
Yeah, I am. He's a few years younger than me, but I realize, too, he goes at a high level, but he also goes at a really slow level, too.
Mm.
He's able to walk around and do nothing. Not say not do nothing, but, pace himself. But, yeah, I mean, for that guy to, and I've seen the bruises on him from dropping that elbow off the top rope, and him do it night after night after night after night. It's just, and his whole leg's a solid bruise. It's just a testimony of how hard, what pain level he would go through to succeed.
Yeah. As a guy that works incredibly hard on your physique and your body, what do you think nowadays of WWE having this whole steroid policy involved, where yet you have all the guys that they push on TV that have the big bodies, and yet they have this, it's almost like a double-edged sword, it seems.
I'm really not familiar with it. I'm only hearing this story through some wrestling fans, and I'll just give you an example. I heard Kurt Angle was fingered out for whatever reason, and I just assumed either he had, said the wrong thing or done something, and they targeted him out for that. But yeah, then, you know as well as I do, this thing that just came out with
the story in Sports Illustrated about all those guys getting busted.
Yeah, it was
Edge was one of them. Shane Helms
and
Angle, I think, was
Kurt Angle
involved.
was in it, and that other guy.
There was somebody else in it.
Orton.
Right.
And now this is what they're retract. This is WWE's statement afterwards, said, as long as these guys are under doctor's supervision, we have no problem with it. So that tells you, and then from my opinion, and this doesn't mean it's right. This isn't the NFL, and if it was, even the NFL, I believe these guys, they got to do what they got to do to make money, and if it makes their football career last a little longer, and if they want to shorten their life up, that's their business. We're independent contractors, supposedly. I think surely not. We shouldn't go to buildings on cocaine or heroin or things like that. But if two, I think steroids have got such a bad rap. They don't really know the good sides of it, and that they don't know. If these doctors are prescribing it and monitoring you, they're not going to do that if there's any really bad repercussions. No, they never have targeted really any one death to steroids other than Lyle Alzado, and they can't target that to him. So I just think that if the guys want to, and especially if you're an independent contractor, as long as you don't get in trouble with it and you're doing it by the law, I don't think you should have a problem with it.
Is it true back in '92 that you failed the steroid test when you were in WWE back then, or
Well, let's say '92. Was that when I came in as Sycho Sid?
It was no. It was
the next time.
no. This was the first time you were in there, and you just headlined WrestleMania against Hogan, and then you were out for a little while. And some say
what happened there was I never was busted for a steroid test. But what happened was this. After that WrestleMania, when all those indictments came down on Vince and stuff, and there was a no tolerance policy. All right, so everybody got tested in the beginning who had been on them was going to be tested positive.
Right. And
so I was tested positive because I hadn't gotten out of my system yet.
Yeah.
But it wasn't no big deal about it. The big deal there was this. When I went first into Vince, what it was is simple. Dusty Rhodes came in and took over WCW. He came to me, Montgomery, Alabama, said, "Look, I'm the new guy here. I want you to be my man. And so to do that, I want you to sign a new contract for 4 or 5 years, new money, the whole 9 yards." So they brought me in. We started negotiating. I thought, man, maybe this is the time for me to call Vince McMahon. And I did. I called. They put me through right away. Vince McMahon, yeah, God, how do I get to this guy this quick? Sid, what are you? Well, I'm negotiating a new deal, and I actually am able to talk to someone, during this. He said, well, he flew me up the very next morning.
Wow.
Laid all this stuff on the table, asked me what I wanted. I said, I wanted Hogan's spot. I wanted that spot. He said, okay, that's your spot. And this is what goes with it. So I went home. Time I got home that afternoon now, WCW found out I was there. They come to the table with more money, more fringe benefits or more, things that make it, something attractive. So I said, okay, well, I'm not going to go. I'm not going to talk to them. I'm not going to make, I'm not going to play the game in between two people. I'm going to let it work itself out. I'm going to stay at WCW and go on with that. As I was going out the door that morning, Vince calls me. Hello? Oh man, I'm sorry, Mr. McMahon. I wasn't going to call you to play the, in between the fences here. I'm going to go ahead and sign the deal with WCW, and maybe down the road we can work with each other. He goes, no, I said, you don't understand. If you don't come now, you don't get this deal.
Wow.
So it's like, man. So I went in, told WCW I'm gone, and I walked out. Now, that's what happened with me in the WWF the first time. They pulled everything they said they were going to do with me, changed everything because Hogan changed his mind. And so then I remember we were in Albany. I went to Vince and said, hey, I want to shake my hand. I'm out of here. I'm quitting. When I'll come back when we can, the things will stay like they were supposed to have stayed.
Yeah.
And the two, I was honest, I just wasn't mature enough or savvy enough for a territory like that. So he wouldn't shake my hand, wouldn't talk about it. And I told him I'd only be there up to WrestleMania, and that's where I pretty much ended.
Yeah.
Did a few shots after that with the Warrior, which was weird.
Yeah. Is he as weird as everybody says that he is?
This is what really made me quit. We're in Baltimore. He's sitting there, and I said, we worked the night before. No, the next night was in Boston Garden. The first night was Baltimore. He goes, okay, I'm going to come in and clothesline. You powder. I said, no, Jim, this is what we'll do. You'll come in, I'll clothesline you. I'll send you off, duck my clothesline, give me one clothesline. Then I powder, and you shake all the ropes you want. He goes, well, the stars tell me he's the Ultimate Warrior. And those little small dressing rooms at the, Baltimore, I was like, where is this camera at? Somebody's bullshitting me, So I left out of the room and went to one of the agents. I said, come on, guys, this is real. I went, let me go back in here. So and the stars are lined up. And so I said, okay, the first night I did it. So we went to Boston the next night. I told him, I said, no, he's not kicking out of my finish. If he kicks out of my finish tonight, I go home tomorrow morning and I never come back. And that's what happened.
Wow. That's where we left off. Now, are you surprised when Vince started wrestling himself in the ring and then kind of continued doing so?
Yeah, I am, because I actually asked him about that once before.
Did you?
When I first worked there, he told me he would never do that because, one, we know this as an owner comes into the territories and participates as a character. That's the greatest form of heat you can achieve. Okay, so where will you go after that? There's nowhere to go after that. All right, saying that, the guy's done everything, and this has happened over the last few years. He's had somebody put his ass in his face, and then he did the last thing a person can do is lose his hair.
Mm-hmm. But
yet, I saw the other night, he's sitting there, looks like he's still wrestling. Someone's telling me he's the champ.
He's wrestling Sunday on pay-per-view.
Yeah, so, I am surprised about it, because one, he told me how, and we know how hard that is. As a manager character, and that's what he is, a manager, he's not a wrestler, that they're short-lived to start with. And if you beat them up once, it's over. And if you cut their hair, it's definitely over. Mm-hmm. So I am a little surprised.
Yeah, because you wrestled in the territories for a while, and Memphis would do that a lot. Somebody would lose the hair of her hair, and they'd be gone and out of there. I read an interview once that somebody asked you about comparing yourself to Steve Austin and The Rock, and you had a really interesting quote. You said that they drew money once in their career where you actually drew money throughout your career.
And I've been more successful than almost anybody in the business. As far as every time I've been put in that position, I drew money. I drew big money. I set indoor tennis records at different buildings across the country. So those guys only came in, and I'm not trying to knock any of them, but Austin was in this business for a long time. He was in WWF before I got there, and the place was on its ass. When I came in, the place caught fire. Now Austin, was a recipient of that. Of course he did well and kept it going, but he kept it going once it was already up.
Yeah.
And then when it went down, he didn't bring it back up.
Yeah. Now, the business has changed a lot, obviously, over the last couple of years. Do you think if you went back to the WWE today, you could still be a big draw for them?
I think I'll be the biggest draw.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. Today, the road schedule is, it's getting pretty intense over there. And, I'd imagine as you get older, you like your days at home. Do you think you could still handle a road schedule like that, a full-time WWF road schedule?
First of all, my road schedule on the road was 10 times tougher than anybody else's. All right. I got up, I was going to my second workout when people were just waking up. So that's never been a problem. And when I think about road schedules, I remember working for WCW one summer with only one day off through the whole summer.
Wow.
Vince and them schedules a lot lighter than it used to be. When I worked for Vince, we worked twice on Saturdays and Sundays, a 12 o'clock show and an evening show. And we did that 7 days a week, with very little time off. And if I did have a day off, I was doing promotional stuff. So they couldn't put anything any tougher on me than I've experienced.
Wow. Now, we talked about this a little earlier. In the last shoot we did, at the end of the shoot, you were, at the time, real angry at Vince, and you were talking about doing the steps, the bleachers, and you said it every time you think about the way that you were treated and the way things went down. But you seem a little more forgiving this time around. Why the change of attitude towards them?
Just matured.
Okay.
I understand this as a job, as a business. I can't take everything personal. At that time, I was. Of course, I felt like I was lied to a little bit at that point. Mm-hmm. But other than that, I still, I think maturity is probably the biggest thing why I could see, and two, I've always said this from the beginning, that I can only achieve the things I want to achieve working for Vince, and I have to like the guy.
Yeah. Do you think there's something to be said for the fact that before you made it to the big time, before you went to WCW, you made it to the WWF at that time, you spent a lot of time on the territories in Continental and Memphis, and and you went back to Memphis throughout your career. Do you think there's something to be said today where guys just get shot right to the top and don't have that time on the territories?
Well, you don't learn the respect for the business when all of a sudden from making $40 a night like I was in Continental in Memphis to making $40,000 a week or whatever. It's hard to appreciate it.
Mm-hmm.
And I've seen so many people change because of that. And I've seen people change that worked the small territories and then got their breaks too.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if it's a big thing, but I think it's not a good thing. I'll tell you, a guy who really did well and they really took him around the hard way was Kurt Angle.
Okay.
When Kurt Angle first started, he was signed with WWF. He was working the Memphis territory.
Right.
He was working the Louisville territory and working for Vince. Probably on unscheduled matches, unadvertised, just being there. So he was working 7 days a week. He's one of the people, probably one of the last people who really worked themselves into a good spot.
Yeah. Now, if for some reason you never went back to the WWE, as an active wrestler, you never went to TNA, wrestling career ended today, do you think that you should be inducted into their Hall of Fame?
I think so, because I know I've done, so much more than just some of the people that have been inducted recently.
Mm-hmm.
Jerry Lawler was one. He's never going to equal anything I've done. Ric Flair either. Some of these guys have been around a long time. They're still not going to equal what I've done. So I think that I should. If I'm not going to worry about it because it doesn't really mean that much.
Yeah.
Stake.
Not that I want to go down the road of, unless you want to, of bashing Ric Flair, but I just had a conversation with Paul Orndorff the other day, and his opinion is that Flair got the push that he had because he was a good politicker and kissed a lot of rear ends. Do you agree with him?
I'll say a little bit, probably so, but then you got to realize Ric Flair was, after Harley Race, he was one of the last real world champions. He went from territory to territory working as a world champion, working hour matches every night. I just think he was in a good place at a good time, and then his name and character and persona just followed him, and I think still follows him today. I definitely don't think he's in the business today because of being an ass kisser. I think he's in there because of his ability to work.
I was going to ask you, are you surprised that he's still wrestling a full-time schedule even today?
No, I'm not. Because you got to realize he loves this like I love it.
Mm-hmm.
And me and him don't think of age.
You can relate to his mentality.
Right.
Then. I read an interview with Lenny Lane from WCW, and he said the thing about you is that you like to rib people when they think they aren't being ribbed, and that some of your classic Sid ribs, as he calls it, is when you don't think you're being ribbed. Is that an accurate statement?
That's true. I'll give you one. The last real rib I did to someone was Billy Kidman. I was just tired of his little crap, and I took his bag and put it up in a ceiling loft, so he never found his bag again. No one ever think of me doing that because I don't do things like that.
Right.
And he hadn't done anything to me personal. I just didn't like the way his attitude was.
Yeah.
For a little guy.
What do you think about the effect that the internet has had on wrestling over the last couple of years?
I think it's just been it's been good, but I think it's been more bad than good. And the reason why is this, and everybody I talked to about this is this, like a guy just recently did a little show back in Memphis. He thought because he had so many hits on his internet site that he was going to sell his place out. He had like 50 people show up. We rely too much on that internet. We got the simple things about this business to make it work is always going to be there. It's not going to change. Internet is not going to sell you out anything. It's Joe Lockhart used to be the spokesman for Bill Clinton. Said it great. It's a great tool, but it could be a horrible two-headed monster.
Mm. Do you think that in the wrestling business overall that they should have some kind of retirement plan set up or some kind of benefits or something for the guys? Or do you think the guys should be personally responsible for that kind of thing? And girls?
I don't know. I really don't think that they owe it. No, I think we know what we're getting into when we get into that business. Just like acting, there's not really a lot of retirement for actors.
Yeah.
And when you're making good money like that, you should be able to set some back and do right by it. Now, if you're playing football and it's a commission and these people are putting their lives on the line and careers are so much shorter, I don't know. I just don't think wrestling. I mean, it'd be nice to have, but I just don't see it happening. I don't see why it should happen.
Yeah. Again, as a guy that spent a lot of time in the territories years ago, and you said you've done some indies, over the last with couple years, couple months. What do you think's missing today from the indies as compared to what was in the territories years ago?
Well, television, one. That's going to be your main thing that the indies don't have. The other is, back in the days of the territories, for instance, like this is used me for example, I say I worked the Texas territory with Devon Erickson and had my run there. Then they're going to go, okay, well, we're going to find you a job. We're going to call Memphis and we're going to tell them what a good guy you are, what you did here, and move you on. Well, independents, it don't really work like that. Independents are sporadic and they're really far apart. So I think that's a downfall for it.
In your opinion, as a student of the game, what do you think draws more money for a territory or promotion? A great worker or a great big man?
Well, it's going to have to be a great big man that can work.
Gotcha.
Doesn't mean he has to do a moonsault off the top rope, but he's got to have some psychology and a sense for the business. Just say, for instance, Elegante, he was a big man, but he never drew money. I didn't have a sense for the business, So I think you can have both, but I think a big man with all the tools are going to be better than a small man with all the tools.
Gotcha. Do you think that the big man will always dominate the business in some form?
And there's a reason for this too. If you weren't so educated for wrestling and knew so much about it, I remember as a kid or seeing things like carnivals and stuff like that, you wanted to see the strong man.
Definitely.
And we understand about this thing about our business, we do understand is that if everybody was like me and Undertaker and Batista and Goldberg, and we didn't have Shawn Michaels who were great workers and other people like John Cena's and stuff like that, then we're not going to be big. We have to have that both. But I think the big man will always be the big draw, because if you look at anything other than in boxing, other than Oscar De La Hoya, the big draw is always a heavyweight fight.
Right.
That's I think that just goes with with the way the world is. Everybody wants to see someone bigger than life.
I think, and I'd love to hear your opinion on this, I think that's a big problem with the independents, is that everybody looks like the guys in the audience and that there's nobody that really stands out.
You hit the nail right on the head right there. That's what I just said. When you come to a wrestling event or you go to a bodybuilding contest or you go to somewhere, you want to see someone bigger than you, or something impressive.
Yeah.
And even if you're a big guy like me, you're impressed by someone who's big also.
Right. Do you ever think about writing a book?
Yeah, that's something I want to do. That's something I'm waiting, for this next run. If I get it with Vince, I want to have a 2-part book. Actually, I want to do the last part of my career first and then the first part of my career second.
Why? How come that?
Well, I think it would be important for the people to know what I've been through over the last 6-7 years and what it took to get back to where I'm at. And then talk a little bit about what's going on at that point. That'd be the end of that book. And then when I finish wrestling, then I could tell all about what happened in, getting to wrestling.
Gotcha. Would you take it if WWE contacted you and said, Sid, we don't have anything for you in the ring, but we'd like to give you an agent job to work with some of our bigger guys and teach them psychology and that kind of thing?
Well, I've always, and that's something that I've made clear too. I want to do that one day. And I really want to help run a territory. That's what I think I really can do. But to get there, you're going to have to start somewhere. And if it had to be just teaching some people some psychology, I'll give you a good example. Ole Anderson, that's how I met him. He was teaching me how to be a tag team, with Danny Spivey, how to cut off the ring, how to smother a person, blah, 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 blah. Teaching me and people like that. Then all of a sudden he was the booker. So I think those are things of how you can be successful in a small part. And then, this guy looks like he can do something. Let's give him a bigger part.
Was Ole really influential to helping you develop early on in your career?
Yeah. I think, in my opinion, Ole Anderson is the smartest person I've ever met for this business.
Wow.
The smartest.
That says a lot. You've met a lot of people.
Yeah. He's just so intelligent, just a hard worker. He's not old school like people think he is, or he wouldn't have gotten all that trouble with the Black Scorpion. That was way above.
Right.
That was, too futuristic.
Mm-hmm.
Now it would be old school. So I think he was, I know this and I can make this a point. He's ahead of his game by this point. So me and Vader were tagging up, working against Sting and Davey Boy. We had these vignettes we did where
Absolutely.
they had them cheering us. We had our own cheering section. So that sort of made the bad guys or the heels cheerable. So he was already starting that 10 years before it happened.
I'm curious for your thoughts on this. Ole also wasn't involved in that Horsemen DVD.
He didn't want to be.
Yeah, because after Vince took over Georgia, he said he would never take a check from him, and he still stands by that vow.
I talked to Ole. That's not really the real reason.
Oh, okay.
The real reason is just he was just not physically able to get to the airport, and it was a hassle to him.
Okay.
He doesn't need the money, and that was more of the reason. He didn't want to check for Vince McMahon.
Gotcha.
I don't believe that.
Gotcha. Over the years, it's been put out there. Oh, Sid loves to take off during softball season.
Mm-hmm.
Is that true?
No, it's not. I'll tell you how that got started. What happened was the very first time that I told you about the deal with Vince walking out to Boston.
Mm-hmm.
It was summertime. It took my attorney like 3 or 4 months to get me out of my contract with WCW. I'd already had one waiting for me.
Mm-hmm.
So it took them that long to get me out of my contract with WWF. So all I did was play softball, and it just seemed like when little things like that happened for me, it was around softball season. And so I played professional softball, not just, little pickup teams.
Oh, okay. Wow. Did you play collegiate baseball or?
No.
No. Oh, okay. Did you play any sports in college or?
No.
No? Oh, okay. Who throughout your career were some of your favorite and for whatever reason, maybe you just didn't have good chemistry or whatever, least favorite guys to work with?
Least favorite? Oh, man.
Sounds like Scott Steiner was.
Steiner was tough. Working with Bret was a little tough.
Yeah.
Well, I did not want to work with him though, but like Elegante guys who were so limited they couldn't do much.
Yeah.
People like that. I didn't really have anyone I just didn't want to work with.
Yeah. Who were the guys that you really, really liked working with?
Well, always top of the list would be Sting. I put Bam Bam Bigelow up there. I put Vader up there. And the reason I like working with those guys and Shawn Michaels, but they were all workhorses. And I'm a workhorse, and I like to work hard every time out. These guys never took a night off.
What do you think about when people make comparisons to you and Batista? I don't know how much you've seen of Batista.
I haven't really heard any of the comparisons.
He's big, he's explosive,
right.
Real physical.
Yeah. I don't know. If I hear a comparison, if I do, which I don't hear many, I'm flattered that someone compares someone else who's right now in a good spot. If they think that, and of course he's got to be thinking the same because I'm before him.
Yeah.
So that question would be more directed to him. How'd he feel being compared to me?
What are your thoughts on newsletters in the wrestling business?
Never read one.
Never read one, ever?
Never ever read one. Never will. Yeah. Never read a magazine. I never look at magazines, okay? First of all, back when I first started, there was only a couple letter magazines, letters. These people had never wrestled before in their life, and if I'm looking for validation, I'm gonna ask Ole Anderson or Robert Fuller or Vince McMahon. I'm not gonna listen to a dirt sheet.
Right. Do you have throughout your career, like maybe one or two mentors that you've always stayed in touch with, no matter where you were, to say, hey, can you take a look at this, or can I get some advice from you on this?
I always called Ole on things, and when I went back to WCW, I used to call Pat Patterson.
Oh.
I'd call him. As a matter of fact, when they were giving me a hard time with Harlem Heat, saying it was too racial, I had these guys coming out, not wearing shackles and chains, but bringing them out and putting them on their opponents, taking these leather straps and strapping white people, okay? And they said it was too racial. One reason they said that, because they didn't like it, was because my idea, and I looked like I was taking over.
Yeah.
So I'd call Pat. Pat says, well, Sid, it could be, but it's really not. So I had, I'd get me an outside opinion, and Pat was one of them.
Yeah. Why do you think that over the last couple of years that some of the younger guys, once they're given the ball, I guess you would have to say in WWE, since there is no WCW anymore, that some of the guys just implode, they just can't take it, and sometimes they ask not to have the belt or the push anymore? Well,
because there's so much pressure on you to succeed, and when it's been out here, only here right now, it's really tough in there right now. They're not drawing very well. And when you're that person or you're the main event, you get all the criticism when it doesn't do well. Mm-hmm. You get all the accolades when it is well, but then, I'm sure these dirt sheets and things that people do read them, that really is tough on them to read this about themselves.
At any point, looking back at your career, did you ever refuse to do a job for whatever reason for somebody? Because you did a lot of them. You put a lot of guys over.
Never refused one.
Never. Do you have any regrets of the way anything worked out in your career?
Only in my leg.
Yeah.
I wish I had jumped off that road.
Yeah. What are some of, looking back, if you had to maybe put a time capsule together, maybe like 5 or 6 of your favorite matches that you had, maybe for your great-great-grandchildren down the line?
Well, I said once the match was Sting and Halloween Havoc because I didn't even know the finish to it happened. That's always going to be my number one. The match with Shawn at the Alamo Dome because of the numbers of people. The one at Hoosier Dome with Hogan because of the numbers of people there. Those are always going to be the ones that stand out to me like that. Yeah.
And do you think that, through the internet and the newsletters, the people that don't know you, do you think there's a misconception about you as compared to the people that do know you and have worked with you?
Yeah, there is. You got to look at me. You look at me, you automatically think, okay, this guy's mean or intimidating. I've got this natural scowl on my face. I'm pretty much shy. And so when you put those two combinations, a mean-looking person who doesn't talk a lot, that and is also very loud when he speaks, people think I'm meaner than I really am.
Yeah.
The deal about, I've heard people say, well, if Sid's not happy, he takes his ball and goes home with it. You just said I've done more jobs than anybody. That's a false statement about me.
Yeah.
I have told, like the time I was winning the belt from Shawn at SummerSlam, the whole deal was I was hit, at Lothario with that camera, and then I think Shawn as well. Then the power bomb, and then I knew I was going to drop the belt back to him in his hometown. I just thought it was a better decision just to beat him clean, and then when he beat me clean, it would meant more. I just told Vince I thought it was not the smartest thing to do. I voiced my opinion about things like that, but I said, hey, you're the boss. I'm going to do what you asked me to do.
Yeah. Now, during that time period, too, Bill Watts, I think, was in...
Bill Watts is another guy I like. Didn't really get to be around him that much, but he's a smart guy, too.
Yeah. I like him, too. I've had him on my radio show, and I like him a lot.
I like him a lot. He was the one that offered me the position in the company to work as a booker. First coming to interview for my job back, he said, I'll tell you what, Sid, man, I like you. He said, would you like to work in the office with me? I said, that's what I want. He was the first one that brought me in.
Something I'd like to get your opinion on. Jerry Jarrett wrote a book, and he said he thinks the reason that a lot of the independents don't do so well is because anybody that has a clue on how to book and how to write are in the WWE, and they're brought up, they're signed, and that kind of thing. There's just not enough people out there that have been there and experienced it, because if they know what they're doing, they'd be up there.
Well, I think why a lot of the reasons independents don't do as well as they could have, and most of the independents I've done up here, say for instance over the years, under people like Mike O'Brien, Dennis Caruso, people like that, they knew how to promote a show. Then you have people who don't know anything about promotion. I think that's probably the biggest problem in independence. It's just not the right promotion, finding the right sponsors.
Why do you think that you were always so over, no matter what role you were playing, heel, baby, or whatever, in the Northeast?
You know what? The Northern people, and I've said this before too, the Northern people they're smarter. And I'm from the South, it's hard to say that. They're smarter. They're not, you can't program the Northern fan, especially the Northeastern fan. You can't program disliking a person or program them to like a person. So when I came up to this area, I always did real well because, they like people who spit on people. That's why I spit on someone. They enjoyed that. And so I just think that was just an automatic deal for me. That's why I always call the Gardens really my hometown.
In WCW, anyway, you were really, from what I remember, other than the Horsemen, you were really one of the first heels that were crazy cheered up in this area when WCW, the NWA Crockett would come up here. Were some of the guys back then that you and Spivey were working with, were they a little frazzled, the baby faces?
They were. Yeah. It was just frustrating. You got to realize, everything I did, they cheered.
Yeah.
Because I'd nip up out of a head scissors and catch a guy with a clothesline. then they would get back to back. Hey, Sid just took advantage of you. That's that's a babyface spot. No, it's a spot.
Right.
And I was physically able to do it. It's 6'8", 6'9", 300 pounds to nip up. That's pretty impressive. So I give you an example. I did it to Sting one time. He let the guys get under his skin about it, and he said, "Hey, you're taking advantage of me." I said, "Steve, don't start like this. This isn't going to work out for you. Okay?
Yeah.
The only thing you're going to do is we're going to get in an argument. We don't need to do that." So I said, "Don't let these guys get under your skin." He didn't. The next night was perfect. Yeah.
Wow. In wrapping up, is there anything, we always like to ask the person being interviewed if they'd like to say something to their fans, because obviously all their fans are the ones that are buying these interviews.
Yeah, I do. And I've not had really anything that would come to me before people would ask me this question, but I do. And just last night coming into New York, to Newark Airport, every time I walk down the street, I am so grateful to have people walk up to me and not tell me that they remembered me. Like, everyone tells me I was the best. And hearing that for my whole life, I know I had to have touched some people in the right way.
Yeah, most definitely. Well, we want to thank you for doing it, and I guess we'll sit down in, another 10 years?
I hope it'll be quicker than that.
Every 10 years. All right, very good. Thanks again for being here.
Thank you.
Thanks.